Anna sat at her small kitchen table in the city. The morning sun was bright, but the room felt small and crowded. She drank her coffee and looked at the busy street below her window. There were many cars and people. Life in the city was always loud and fast. Anna worked as an office manager, and she was very tired. She wanted a quiet life. Suddenly, her doorbell made a sharp, clear noise. She opened the door. A man stood in the hallway. He wore a dark suit and carried a black leather bag. He looked very professional. "Are you Anna?" the man asked. Anna nodded her head. "Yes, I am. How can I help you?" she asked. "My name is Mr. Barnes." The man said, "I am a lawyer. I have some important news about your uncle, George." Anna was surprised. She invited him inside. They sat in the small living room. Mr. Barnes took some papers out of his bag. "I'm sorry to tell you that your Uncle George passed away last month," he said in a soft voice. Anna felt a little sad. She remembered George from many years ago. He was a tall man with a kind smile and messy hair. He always sent her a card for her birthday. But he lived very far away. He lived in a small town by the sea called Silver Cove. Anna had not seen him in 10 years. "He left everything to you in his will," Mr. Barnes continued. "He had no children and no other family. You now own his house in Silver Cove." He took a photograph out of his bag and put it on the table. Anna looked at the photo. The house was beautiful but a little scary. It was very big and very old. It was made of heavy grey stone. There were many tall windows and a large wooden door. The house sat on a high cliff above the blue ocean. There were no other houses near it. "It is a very special house," Mr. Barnes said. "But it is also very isolated. It sits alone on the edge of the world." Anna looked at the photo for a long time. She felt a strange feeling in her heart. She was tired of her job and her small apartment. She wanted to see the ocean and hear the waves. Maybe this was a chance for a new start. She wanted to see what was inside that big stone house. "I want to go there," Anna said. "I want to see the house." "That is a good idea," Mr. Barnes replied. He reached into his bag and gave her a heavy set of keys. "The house is yours now. Please be careful. It is an old building with many secrets." Anna thanked the lawyer and walked him to the door. After he left, she looked at the keys. They were cold and heavy in her hand. One key was very different from the others. It was smaller and very shiny. It was made of bright silver. She wondered what it opened. That night, Anna could not sleep. She thought about the house on the cliff. The next morning, she packed her clothes into 2 large suitcases. She called her boss and told him she was leaving. She was ready for her new life. She drove her car out of the city and toward the coast. The air began to smell like salt. She was finally going to Silver Cove. Anna drove her car for many hours. The road was long and winding. She saw many green trees and blue hills. Slowly, the air became cooler. She smelled the salt of the sea. She was getting close to Silver Cove. She was tired, but she was also very excited. This was the start of her new life. She looked at the map on her seat and turned toward the coast. She entered the town in the late afternoon. Silver Cove was very small. There was one main street with a few shops. There was a small cafe, a grocery store, and a tiny post office. The buildings were old and made of wood or stone. A few people walked on the sidewalk. They wore warm coats because the wind from the sea was strong. They looked at Anna's car as she drove past. She felt like a stranger here, but she hoped to make friends soon. Anna stopped at the grocery store. She needed to buy some food and water. The man behind the counter was old. He had white hair and kind eyes. "Are you visiting?" he asked as he put her bread and milk in a bag. "I am moving here," Anna said with a smile. "I am George's niece. I am going to live in his house on the cliff." The man stopped moving. He looked surprised. "Oh, the old mansion," he said quietly. George was a good man, but he lived in a very lonely place. "Be careful up there. The wind is very powerful on the cliff, and the house has been empty for a while." Anna thanked him and went back to her car. She felt a little nervous now. Why did the man look so surprised? She followed the road out of the town. The road went up, higher and higher. On one side, there was a tall mountain. On the other side, there was a deep drop to the ocean. The waves hit the rocks far below. A loud noise of water filled the air. Finally, she saw the house. It was even bigger than the photograph. The grey stone walls looked dark against the cloudy sky. The house had 3 floors and a large tower on one side. There were many windows, but they all looked like dark eyes. There were no trees near the house, only short grass and hard rocks. It looked like the house was watching the sea. Anna parked her car in front of the large wooden door. She felt very small standing there. She took the heavy keys out of her bag. Her hands were shaking a little bit because of the cold wind. She found the large, old key for the front door. She put it into the lock and turned it. The door was heavy and hard to move. It opened slowly. She stepped inside. The air inside the house was very cold. It smelled like old paper and dust. The hallway was very long and dark. There was a large rug on the floor and many old paintings of the sea on the walls. All the furniture was covered with white sheets. It looked like a house of ghosts. It was very quiet. She could only hear the sound of her own shoes on the floor. Anna took her suitcases inside and closed the door. She was alone in her new home. She looked at the small silver key in her hand. It was beautiful and mysterious. "What do you open?" she whispered to the empty room. The only answer was the wind shaking the windows. Anna walked through the large house with a small flashlight. The sun was going down, and the rooms were becoming dark. She found the kitchen at the back of the house. It was a large room with a very old stove and a heavy wooden table. The floor was made of cold stone. She put her grocery bag on the table and looked around. Everything was very clean, but very old. It felt like time stopped inside this house many years ago. She decided to explore the second floor. She climbed the wide wooden stairs. Every step she took made a loud creaking noise in the silent house. On the second floor, there were many doors. Most of them were bedrooms. She opened one door and found a large bed with a dark blue blanket. This room had a big window. From the window, she could see the lighthouse in the distance. The light from the lighthouse moved across the dark water every few seconds. It was a beautiful and lonely sight. "I will sleep here," Anna said to herself. Her voice sounded strange in the big, empty room. She went back downstairs to get her suitcases. The house felt colder now that the sun was gone. The wind outside was very strong. It hit the stone walls of the house with a loud force. Anna felt a little bit afraid, but she told herself it was just an old house. She brought her bags up to the bedroom and unpacked some of her clothes. She felt very tired from the long drive and the fresh sea air. She changed into her pajamas and sat on the bed. She looked at the small silver key on the nightstand. It was so bright and clean compared to the rest of the house. She wondered what her Uncle George wanted to hide. Why did he give her this key through a lawyer? She had so many questions, but she was too tired to think. She turned off her flashlight and closed her eyes. For a long time, there was only the sound of the wind. But then, Anna woke up. She sat up in bed and listened. The house was very dark. She heard a soft noise. It was not the wind. It sounded like footsteps. Someone was walking slowly in the hallway outside her door. The footsteps were light and steady. Anna held her breath. Her heart was beating very fast. She reached for her flashlight, but she did not turn it on. She did not want anyone to know she was awake. She waited for a long time. The footsteps moved away from her door and toward the stairs. Then, the house was silent again. Is someone here? She thought. She remembered the lawyer's words. He said the house was empty. She also remembered the old man in the shop. He said the house was lonely. Anna did not sleep for the rest of the night. She watched the light from the lighthouse move across her wall. She stayed in her bed until the sky became gray and then orange. When the sun finally came up, she felt a little more brave. She stood up and opened her bedroom door. The hallway was completely empty. There was no one there. But Anna knew what she heard. She was not alone in the house. The morning light was bright and cold. Anna went down the stairs slowly. She looked at the floor, but she did not see any footprints. The house was very quiet now. She went to the kitchen and made a cup of hot tea. She needed to feel brave. She decided to explore the house during the day. She wanted to know every room. She wanted to know why she heard footsteps in the night. She found a large door at the end of the hallway. It was a heavy wooden door with a beautiful pattern. She pushed it open. This was the library. The room was very large. The walls were covered with bookshelves from the floor to the high ceiling. There were thousands of books. The air was thick with the smell of old paper and dust. There was a large desk in the middle of the room and a comfortable leather chair. Anna walked to the bookshelves. She looked at the titles of the books. There were books about history, science, and the sea. Many of the books were very old. She saw a thick layer of dust on everything. She found a cleaning cloth in the kitchen and came back. She began to clean the desk and the shelves. She wanted the room to feel clean and nice. While she was cleaning the third shelf, she saw a very strange book. It was not like the other books. It did not have a title on the front. It was covered in dark red leather. It was very heavy. Anna pulled the book from the shelf. When she moved the book, she heard a small noise behind the wood of the shelf. She looked into the empty space. There was a small, square hole in the back of the bookshelf. Inside the hole, there was a tiny wooden box. Anna took the box out and put it on the large desk. The box was very old and had beautiful silver decorations on the corners. In the center of the box, there was a small keyhole. Anna felt her heart beat faster. She remembered the small silver key in her pocket. She took the key out. It was shiny and bright in the sunlight. She put the silver key into the lock of the box. It fit perfectly. She turned the key slowly. A sharp noise came from the lock as it opened. She lifted the lid of the box. Inside, there was not gold or money. There was a small, white envelope and a gold ring with a red stone. Anna took the envelope. Her name was written on the front in messy handwriting. It was her Uncle George's handwriting. She opened the envelope and took out a piece of paper. The note was short. It said, "Anna, I'm glad you found this. This house has a secret history. The silver key is the first step. Do not trust everyone in town. Look for the woman in the garden." Anna read the note 3 times. She felt a cold shiver on her back. Who was the woman in the garden? And why did her uncle tell her not to trust the people in the town? She looked out of the library window. The garden was full of tall grass and dead flowers. No one was there. She put the note back in her pocket and held the silver key tightly. Anna spent the rest of the morning in the garden. The note from her uncle was in her pocket. She looked at the tall grass and the dry bushes. The wind was still cold, and she pulled her coat closer to her body. She looked for a statue or a painting of a woman, but she saw nothing. The garden was a mess. There were old stone paths covered in green moss. At the edge of the garden, there was a tall wooden fence. Beyond the fence, the cliff dropped down to the sea. As she walked near the fence, she saw a movement. A man was standing on the other side of the wooden gate. He was an older man with grey hair and a kind face. He wore a heavy green coat and held a wooden walking stick. He smiled when he saw Anna. "Hello there," the man said. His voice was loud and cheerful. "You must be Anna. I am your neighbor, Mr. Henderson." Anna walked toward the gate. "Hello, Mr. Henderson." "Yes, I am Anna. How did you know my name?" The man laughed softly. "This is a very small town, my dear. News travels fast here. Everyone knows that George's niece is staying at the mansion. I live in the small house just down the road." He pointed to a small cottage with a red roof. "I was a very good friend of your uncle. We often had tea together." "It is nice to meet you," Anna said. She remembered her uncle's note. "Do not trust everyone in town." She felt a little bit nervous, but Mr. Henderson looked very friendly. George was a very private man, Mr. Henderson said. He looked at the big stone house behind Anna. He didn't have many visitors. He spent a lot of time in that library of his. "Did you find everything okay inside?" "The house is very old and sometimes the lights do not work. It is a bit dark, but I am fine," Anna replied. She did not mention the footsteps she heard in the night. Mr. Henderson leaned against the gate. He looked at Anna's face carefully. "Did George leave you anything interesting?" "He was always collecting old things. He loved history and mysteries." Anna felt a small spark of suspicion. Why was he asking about interesting things? She thought about the silver key and the hidden box. No, just the house and the furniture. She lied. Mr. Henderson nodded, but his eyes stayed on her for a moment too long. "I see. Well, if you need anything, please come to my house. It can be very lonely up here on the cliff, and the weather can change very fast. You should stay inside when the fog comes." "Thank you, Mr. Henderson," Anna said. "Have a good day, Anna," he said. He turned and walked away slowly with his walking stick. Anna watched him go. He seemed like a nice man, but she did not feel comfortable. He asked a lot of questions about the house and George's things. She went back inside and locked the heavy wooden door. She felt like someone was watching her from the trees or the windows. She went to the kitchen and looked at the silver key again. She had a house, a key, and a warning. Now, she needed to find the truth. The air inside the mansion was too quiet. Anna felt the weight of the silver key in her pocket. She decided to leave the house for a while. She wanted to see other people and hear friendly voices. She drove her car down the long, winding road to the center of Silver Cove. The gray sky was heavy with clouds, and the ocean looked dark and powerful. She found a small place called the Anchor Cafe. It was a cozy building with yellow walls and a blue door. When she walked inside, the room was warm and smelled like fried eggs and fresh coffee. There were 4 or 5 people sitting at the tables. They all stopped talking and looked at her. Anna felt a little bit shy, but she walked to the counter. A woman with a bright red apron smiled at her. "Good morning. You must be the young lady from George's house. I am Martha," the woman said. "Hello, Martha. I am Anna," she replied. "I would like a cup of coffee and a sandwich, please." "Of course, dear. Sit anywhere you like," Martha said. Anna chose a table in the corner near the window. From here, she could see the fishing boats in the harbor. A few minutes later, Martha brought her coffee. "It is a big house for one person," Martha said quietly. Are you doing okay up there? George was a very quiet man, but he was always kind. I'm fine, thank you, Anna said. But the house is very old. It has many strange corners. She paused and then asked, did my uncle ever talk about a treasure? Or a story about the cliffs? An old man at the next table turned around. He had a very wrinkled face and wore a fisherman's hat. The legend of the silver ship. He said in a deep voice. Everyone in this town knows that story. Anna looked at him. The silver ship. What is that? The man leaned forward. 80 years ago, a big ship was sailing past these cliffs during a terrible storm. The ship was full of gold and beautiful art from Europe. It hit the rocks and broke into many pieces. People say the treasure is still there, hidden in the deep water or in the sea caves under your house. Martha nodded. Some people say George found something. He spent a lot of time walking on the beach and looking at the rocks. But he never told anyone. He was a very private man. Is there a story about a woman? Anna asked, remembering her uncle's note. A woman in a garden. The old man shook his head. I don't know about a garden. But there was a woman many years ago. A painter named Sophia. She lived in the town and was a good friend of George. Then, one day, she just disappeared. No one ever saw her again. Some people say she moved away, but others think she is still here, watching the sea. Anna felt a cold feeling in her stomach. Sophia. The name felt important. She finished her coffee and thanked Martha and the old man. As she walked back to her car, she looked up at the high cliffs. The legend of the treasure and the story of the missing woman filled her mind. Her uncle's house was not just an old building. It was the center of a big mystery. She drove back to the mansion, feeling more curious and more afraid than before. Anna arrived back at the mansion as the sun began to hide behind the thick clouds. The conversation at the cafe stayed in her mind. Who was Sophia? Why did she disappear? Anna looked at the garden again. It was a wild place. The grass was tall and yellow. Dead vines climbed the stone walls of the house like long, thin fingers. She remembered her uncle's note. Look for the woman in the garden. She decided to walk to the very back of the property. The ground was uneven and rocky. Near the edge of the high cliff, she found a small building. It was a garden shed made of old, grey wood. The wood was peeling, and the roof was covered in green moss. The door was not locked. It hung open on one metal hinge. Anna pushed the door. It moved slowly against the stone floor. Inside, the shed was very dark. It smelled like wet earth, old wood, and rust. Anna used the flashlight on her phone to see. There were many old things inside. She saw broken flower pots, a heavy iron shovel, and long coils of rope. Spiders had made webs in every corner. Anna moved carefully. She did not want to touch the sticky webs. In the corner of the shed, she saw a wooden bench. Under the bench, there was a heavy piece of blue cloth. It was covered in thick dust. Anna pulled the cloth away. Underneath was a wooden box. This box was different from the silver one in the library. It was larger and made of dark, heavy oak wood. It had thick metal bands around the corners. It looked very old and very strong. In the center of the box, there was a large, circular lock. Anna felt a spark of hope. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the shiny silver key. This must be it, she said quietly. Her heart was beating fast. She put the silver key toward the lock. But when she tried to put the key inside, it did not fit. The silver key was too small and thin for the heavy metal lock. She tried again and again, but the key simply did not work. Anna felt a wave of disappointment. If the silver key did not open this box, what did it open? And what was inside this heavy wooden chest? She tried to lift the box, but it was too heavy for her to move alone. It felt like it was filled with stones or heavy metal. She stood up and looked around the shed again. Was there another key hidden here? She searched the drawers of the workbench and looked inside the old pots, but she found nothing. Suddenly, the air in the shed felt very cold. Anna looked out of the small, dirty window. Through the glass, she saw a movement near the trees at the edge of the garden. A tall shadow stood there for a second. It looked like a person in a long coat. Then, the shadow moved behind a large tree and disappeared. Anna did not wait. She left the box and ran out of the shed. She ran through the tall grass and did not stop until she reached the heavy back door of the mansion. She went inside and locked the door with 3 turns of the key. She stood in the dark kitchen, breathing hard. Someone was outside. Someone was watching her search the garden. Anna stayed in the kitchen for a long time. She did not want to move. The tea in her cup was cold and bitter. She thought about the shadow she saw near the trees. Was it Mr. Henderson? Or was it a stranger? The house felt too big and too open. She went from room to room and checked every window. She locked every door. Her hands were still shaking, and her breath was fast. She decided to go to her bedroom on the 2nd floor. She felt a little safer upstairs. She turned on the small lamp next to her bed. The light was soft and yellow, but it did not reach the dark corners of the room. She took her uncle's note out of her pocket. "Look for the woman in the garden." She read again. She had looked, but she only found a heavy box that she could not open and a mysterious shadow. The storm outside was getting worse. Dark clouds covered the moon and the stars. The only light came from the distant lighthouse on the other side of the bay. Every few seconds, a long beam of white light moved across the sea and the garden. Anna sat on the edge of her bed near the window. She stayed in the dark and watched the light move. The lighthouse beam passed over the garden. For a second, everything was bright. Anna gasped and pulled the curtain. A man was standing in the middle of the tall grass. He was tall and wore a long, dark coat. He was not moving. He was standing perfectly still, looking up at her bedroom window. Anna moved back into the shadows of her room. She did not want him to see her. She waited for the light to come back. 10 seconds later, the white beam moved across the garden again. The man was still there. He was closer now. He was standing near the old stone path that led to the front door. Anna could not see his face, but she felt his eyes on her. It was a cold, scary feeling. She felt a deep panic. She wanted to call for help, but she did not have a telephone in the house yet. Her cell phone had no signal in this remote place on the cliff. She was completely alone. She watched the garden for an hour. The light moved back and forth, back and forth. Finally, the man was gone. The garden was empty. Anna did not sleep that night. She pulled a heavy wooden chair to the corner of the room. She held a large metal flashlight like a weapon. Every time the wind hit the house, she jumped. She thought about the old fisherman's story at the cafe. Was this man looking for the silver ship treasure? Or did he know about the silver key? She realized she could not stay in the house alone without answers. She looked at the gold ring with the red stone she found in the library. She put it on her finger. It was a little bit too big, but it felt warm. She wondered if the ring belonged to Sophia, the artist who disappeared. Maybe the man in the garden was looking for Sophia. The mystery of Silver Cove was becoming very dangerous. The sun came up slowly over the ocean. The sky was a pale, cold blue. Anna felt very tired. Her eyes were heavy because she did not sleep. She left her bedroom and walked down the stairs. The house was cold and silent. She checked the front door. It was still locked. She checked the back door. It was also locked. But she knew the man was in the garden last night. She felt like the house was not a safe place anymore. She went back to the library. The smell of old books usually made her feel calm, but today she felt nervous. She looked at the large wooden desk in the middle of the room. It was made of dark, heavy oak. Yesterday, she cleaned the top of the desk, but she did not look inside the drawers. She sat in the leather chair. She looked at the top drawer of the desk. She saw something strange. There were small scratches on the wood around the lock. The wood was broken in one corner. Someone had used a tool to force the drawer open. Anna felt a cold chill in her heart. This was not old damage. The wood was bright and fresh where it was broken. Someone was inside this room recently. She pulled the drawer open. It was almost empty. There were a few old pens and some blank paper, but in the center of the drawer, there was a clean, rectangular space in the dust. Something was there before, but it was gone now. The diary. Anna whispered. She remembered a photograph she saw in the lawyer's office. In the photo, Uncle George was sitting at this desk. There was a thick, black book with a gold lock on the table. It was his personal diary. Mr. Barnes, the lawyer, told her that George wrote in it every single day for 40 years. It was the history of his life and his secrets. Anna searched the other drawers. She found old bills, maps of the stars, and letters about the garden. But the black diary was not there. She searched the bookshelves behind the desk. She moved the books and looked in the shadows. She found nothing. The diary was gone. Who took it? Was it the man she saw in the garden last night? Or was someone inside the house while she was sleeping? She thought about the footsteps she heard on her first night. Maybe they were looking for the diary then. She realized that the diary was very important. It probably contained the truth about the silver key, the woman in the garden, and the silver ship treasure. Without the diary, Anna was lost. She only had a small silver key and a gold ring. She looked at the scratches on the desk again. The person who took the diary was in a hurry. They broke the wood because they did not have a key. This meant they were looking for something specific. Anna felt a sense of urgency. She needed to find that diary before the thief left the town. She walked to the window and looked out at the sea. The waves were high and white. She felt like she was in a race against a person she did not know. She decided to go back to the town. She needed to talk to the police or find someone who knew about her uncle's daily life. She grabbed her coat and her bag. She held the silver key tightly in her hand. It was the only thing the thief did not find. Anna returned to her bedroom. She felt very restless. The missing diary was a big problem. She felt like someone was always one step ahead of her. She looked at the large, dark room. The furniture was heavy and old. There was a very large wooden wardrobe against the far wall. It was made of dark oak and reached almost to the ceiling. It looked like it had been there for 100 years. I need to change things, Anna thought. I need to make this room my own. She also wanted to see if anything was hidden behind the furniture. She began to push the heavy wardrobe. It was very difficult to move. She put her shoulder against the wood and pushed with all her strength. Her feet slid on the wooden floor. Slowly, the wardrobe began to move. The heavy wood moved across the floorboards. A thick cloud of gray dust rose into the air. Anna coughed and wiped her face. She pushed it a few more inches. Behind the wardrobe, the wallpaper was a different color. It was bright yellow, while the rest of the room was a faded blue. But that was not the only thing she saw. In the middle of the yellow wall, there was a small wooden door. It was about half the size of a normal door. It was painted white, but the paint was peeling and old. Anna stopped pushing. She was breathing very hard. She looked at the small door with wide eyes. Her heart was beating fast in her chest. Another secret. she whispered. She walked closer to the small door. There was a lot of dust and many thick spiderwebs in the corners. She used a piece of cloth to clean the wood. In the center of the door, there was a small, round metal plate with a tiny hole. It was a lock. Anna felt a familiar shape in her pocket. She took out the silver key. She looked at the key and then at the lock. This lock was much smaller than the one on the heavy chest in the garden shed. It was the same size as the lock on the silver box in the library. Anna held the key with shaking fingers. She put the key into the lock. It slid inside perfectly. She turned the key to the right. The lock was open. Anna pulled the small handle. The door opened slowly. Behind the door, it was completely dark. She could not see anything. A cold, dry wind came out of the dark space. It smelled like old stone and very old air. Anna felt a shiver of fear, but she was also very curious. She reached for her flashlight on the nightstand and turned it on. The light moved into the darkness. She saw a very narrow set of stone stairs. The stairs went down into the wall. They were very steep and very small. It looked like a secret path that went deep into the house. Where does this go? Anna wondered. She thought about the footsteps she heard on the first night. Maybe the person was using these stairs. Maybe this was how they moved through the house without being seen. Anna looked at the dark stairs and then at the bright sun outside her window. She was afraid to go down alone, but she knew she had to. The secrets of the mansion were hidden in the dark. She took a deep breath, held her flashlight tightly, and prepared to step into the hidden hallway. Anna stood at the top of the narrow stone stairs. Her flashlight was a bright circle in the deep darkness. She felt the cold air on her face. She was afraid, but she wanted to know the truth. She put one foot on the first step. The stone was cold under her shoes. She began to walk down, one step at a time. The stairs were very narrow. Her shoulders touched the cold stone walls on both sides. She counted the steps. 1, 2, 3, 20. The stairs went deep into the middle of the house. Finally, she reached the bottom. She moved her flashlight around the space. She was not in a hallway. She was in a tiny, square room. It was hidden inside the thick walls of the mansion. There were no windows, and the ceiling was very low. The room was very dusty. It smelled like very old clothes and dry wood. In the center of the room, there was a small wooden table and a single wooden chair. The chair looked very uncomfortable. It was a lonely place. Anna wondered who spent time here. Was it Uncle George? Or was it someone else? She walked to the table. It was covered in a thick layer of gray dust. She saw the marks of fingers in the dust. Someone was here recently. They touched the table and the chair. Anna felt a shiver of fear. Was the man from the garden using this secret room? She looked at the floor and saw a small piece of white paper. She picked it up. It was a photograph. The photo was old and the corners were yellow. It showed a woman with long, dark hair and a beautiful smile. She was standing in the garden of the mansion. Behind her, the roses were bright and healthy. Anna recognized the face. It was Sophia, the artist from the local legend. She looked very happy in the photo. On the table, there was a small lamp, but it did not have any oil. Next to the lamp, there was a heavy black object. Anna moved her light closer. It was a metal box, but it was open. It was empty. She felt a wave of sadness. Maybe this was where the diary was kept before someone took it. Anna sat on the single chair. She felt like she was in a different world. The sounds of the wind and the ocean were very quiet here. She looked at the stone walls. She saw small marks on the wall near the table. They were lines, like someone was counting the days. There were hundreds of lines. Someone stayed in this tiny room for a very long time. Who lived here? Anna asked quietly. She looked at the table again. In a dark corner, under the leg of the table, she saw something else. It was a piece of thick, yellow paper. It was folded many times. Anna reached down and took the paper. She unfolded it carefully. It was not a letter. It was a hand-drawn map. It showed the coastline of Silver Cove and the high cliffs. There was a large red X near a place called the Sea Cave. Anna held the map tightly. This was a new piece of the mystery. The silver key led her to the hidden door, and the hidden door led her to the map. She felt like her uncle was guiding her. She stood up and prepared to climb back up the stairs. She needed to study this map in the light. She was closer to the secret of the silver ship than ever before. Anna climbed back up the narrow stone stairs. Her legs felt heavy and tired. When she reached her bedroom, the bright sunlight felt strange on her eyes. She quickly pushed the heavy wardrobe back to its original place. The secret door was hidden once again. She sat on her bed and breathed deeply. The cold air from the secret room was still on her skin. She took the yellow paper from her pocket and opened it on the bed. The map was very old. The edges were thin and brown. It was a drawing of the cliffs near the mansion. The lines were careful and straight. Her uncle was a man who liked details. On the map, she saw the Blue Mountain Hotel, the old lighthouse, and the Anchor Cafe. But the most important part of the map was the coastline. Below the mansion, there was a drawing of a large cave. Next to the cave, someone had marked a large red X. Under the X, there was a single word written in small letters. Hope. What did he hope for? Anna asked herself. Was it the treasure from the silver ship? Or was it something about Sophia? Anna went down to the library. She wanted to compare this old drawing with a modern map of Silver Cove. She found a book of local maps on the shelf. She put the two maps side by side on the large desk. The modern map showed the cliffs, but it did not show a cave. It only showed a dangerous area with many sharp rocks. Maybe the cave is hidden, Anna thought. Maybe you can only see it when the water is low. She remembered the old fisherman at the cafe. He said the treasure was in the sea caves. But he also said the caves were dangerous. The ocean was very powerful at the bottom of the cliffs. The waves were big, and the rocks were sharp like knives. She looked at the old photograph of Sophia again. Sophia looked so happy in the garden. Did Sophia know about the cave? Anna felt like the mystery was a big puzzle. The silver key opened the secret door. The secret door led to the map. The map led to the cave. She decided that she must go to the cliffs. She could not sit in the house and wait. But she needed to be careful. The man in the garden was still a mystery. She did not know if he was a friend or an enemy. She went to the kitchen and found a pair of heavy boots and a warm jacket. She also took a large, strong flashlight. She looked at the clock. It was mid-morning. The tide was going out. This was the best time to see the bottom of the cliffs. She put the old map in her pocket and the silver key in her bag. She felt a mix of fear and excitement. She was a simple office manager from the city, but now she was a detective in a mystery. She walked out of the back door and toward the edge of the cliff. The wind was waiting for her. Anna was about to leave the house, but she stopped at the front door. She looked at the silver key in her hand. She felt like she missed something in the secret room. The map was important, but why was the metal box on the table empty? She decided to go back down the narrow stairs one more time. She wanted to be sure. She moved the heavy wardrobe and opened the small white door. She went down the 20 stone steps into the dark. The air was still cold and smelled like dust. She turned on her flashlight. The light moved across the small table and the lonely chair. She looked at the floor very carefully this time. She moved her light along the edges of the stone walls. In a dark corner, behind the leg of the table, she saw a loose stone in the floor. It was slightly higher than the other stones. Anna knelt on the cold ground. She used her fingers to pull at the edge of the stone. It was heavy, but it moved. She lifted the stone and set it aside. Under the stone, there was a small hole in the earth. Inside the hole was a small wooden chest. It was made of light-colored wood and had a very beautiful silver lock on the front. This was the chest from her uncle's stories. It looked very different from the heavy box in the garden shed. This one was small enough to hold in her hands. Anna took the chest out of the hole and put it on the table. She took a deep breath. She put the silver key into the lock. It was a perfect fit. She turned the key. A clear, metallic click echoed in the quiet room. The lock was open. She lifted the lid of the chest. Inside, there was a stack of old letters. They were tied together with a piece of blue ribbon. The paper was thin and very yellow. Anna took the first letter. The handwriting was elegant and beautiful. At the bottom of the page, there was a single letter for a signature. S. Sophia. Anna whispered. She began to read the first letter. The date was from 40 years ago. My dear George, the letter began. The secret is safe for now. The others are looking for the silver ship, but they do not know about the cave. We must protect the discovery. It is more than just gold and paintings. It is our history. Anna's hands were shaking. She read the next letter. I am afraid. George. A man is watching my house. He wants the map. If I disappear, look for the silver key. It will tell you the truth. The letters were full of fear and love. Sophia and George were working together to hide something very important. They were not looking for the treasure to become rich. They were protecting it from someone else. But who were the others? And was the man watching Sophia the same man Anna saw in the garden last night? Anna put the letters back into the chest and locked it. She felt a heavy responsibility. She was not just a niece who inherited a house. She was now the protector of a secret. She held the chest close to her chest and climbed back up the stairs. She was ready to go to the sea cave now. She had the map, she had the letters, and she had the truth in her hands. Anna sat on her bed and spread the letters across the blue blanket. The afternoon sun was low in the sky, casting long, orange shadows across the room. She picked up the third letter in the stack. The paper felt like dry leaves in her hands. She read the words carefully. Sophia's writing was elegant but hurried, as if she was writing while she was in a great rush. George, the letter said. I found the last piece of the collection today. The others think the paintings were destroyed when the ship hit the rocks. They think the salt water ruined everything. But they are wrong. The boxes were sealed with thick wax. The art is perfect. It is the most beautiful thing I have ever seen. We cannot let Mr. H find them. He only wants the money. He does not care about the beauty or the history. Anna stopped reading. Mr. H, she whispered. She immediately thought of her neighbor, Mr. Henderson. He was friendly, but he asked many questions about George's things. Was he the Mr. H in the letter? Was he the person Sophia was hiding from 40 years ago? She looked at the next letter. This one was dated just 2 days before Sophia disappeared. The cave is ready. I have moved the last of the paintings there. The tide is the only key. When the water is high, the entrance is hidden. When the water is low, the path is dangerous. Only you and I know the way. If anything happens to me, George, keep the silver key safe. It is the only way to open the inner door. Anna realized that the great discovery was a collection of lost art. The silver ship was carrying famous paintings, and Sophia had saved them. Sophia and George were not thieves. They were protectors. They kept the paintings in a secret sea cave to keep them away from greedy people. Anna felt a deep respect for her uncle. He lived a lonely life on this cliff to protect a secret that belonged to the world. He was a guardian. Now, that job belonged to her. She looked at the gold ring on her finger. The red stone glowed in the sunset. She wondered if the ring was a gift from George to Sophia. She felt a new sense of purpose. She was no longer just a woman who inherited an old house. She was part of a story that started many years ago. She gathered the letters and put them back into the small wooden chest. She locked it with the silver key and hid the chest under her bed. The wind outside began to grow louder. A heavy storm was coming, just like the night she arrived. Anna looked at the old map again. The red X was calling to her. She knew she had to go to the sea cave, but she also knew she was being watched. She had to be smarter than the man in the garden. She went to the kitchen and ate a quick meal. She needed her strength. She checked her flashlight and put extra batteries in her pocket. She put on her heavy boots and her waterproof coat. She was ready to face the cliffs and the secrets of the ocean. Anna was putting on her heavy boots when she heard a loud, steady knocking at the front door. Her heart jumped in her chest. She was not expecting anyone. She walked to the window and looked down. Mr. Henderson was standing on the porch. He was wearing his green coat and holding a small brown box. He looked up and saw her. Then he smiled and waved his hand. Anna did not want to open the door. She thought about the letter and the name Mr. H. But she did not want him to be suspicious. She took off her boots and went to the hallway. She opened the heavy door slowly. "Hello, Anna. I saw your lights were on," Mr. Henderson said. His voice was friendly, but his eyes moved quickly behind her, looking into the house. "I brought you some homemade cakes. It is a cold afternoon, and I thought you might like something sweet with your tea." "That is very kind of you, Mr. Henderson," Anna said. She tried to keep her voice calm. "Please, come in." They went to the kitchen. Anna put the kettle on the stove. The water began to boil, and a cloud of white steam rose into the air. She made 2 cups of tea and put the cakes on a plate. Mr. Henderson sat at the wooden table. He looked very nervous. He kept moving his hands and looking at the door to the library. "So," he began, "have you found anything interesting in the house?" George was a man who kept many things. Sometimes old houses like this have hidden spaces. Anna took a sip of her tea. "No," she lied. "It is just a lot of dust and old books. I am mostly just cleaning." Mr. Henderson leaned forward. His face was very close to hers. "Are you sure? I remember George talking about a special key. A silver one. Did you find a silver key, Anna?" Anna felt a cold wave of fear. How did he know about the key? She kept her face still. "A silver key? No, I haven't seen anything like that. Why was it important?" Mr. Henderson laughed. "Oh, it was probably just an old story. George loved stories." He stood up and walked to the kitchen window. He looked out at the garden and the cliffs. "The weather is turning bad, Anna. A very big storm is coming tonight. You should stay inside. The cliffs are very dangerous in the rain. People can get lost very easily." "I will be careful," Anna said. "I hope so," Mr. Henderson replied. He walked toward the front door. Before he left, he stopped and looked at her one more time. "This house has a long history, Anna. Some things are better if they stay hidden. Good night." He closed the door behind him. Anna stood in the kitchen for a long time. She did not eat the cakes. She felt like he was giving her a warning, or perhaps a threat. She was now certain that Mr. Henderson was the man from the letters. He was looking for the paintings, and he knew about the silver key. She looked at the clock. The sun was almost gone. She could not go to the cave in the dark during a storm. She had to wait for the morning, but she knew she had to hide the silver key and the letters in a better place. Mr. Henderson was watching her, and he was getting impatient. The next morning, the sky was a heavy grey. Anna did not feel safe in the mansion. She felt like the walls had ears and the windows were eyes. She put the silver key and the letters in her bag. She decided to go to the village. She needed more information about Sophia and the history of her uncle's house. She drove her car down the cliff road. The wind was strong, and the sea was a dark, angry green. The town library was a small, stone building near the center of the village. It was very old and had a heavy wooden door. When Anna walked inside, the air was warm and smelled like old paper. It was a very quiet place. There were many rows of tall bookshelves. A woman was sitting at a large desk near the window. She had short grey hair and wore a bright yellow sweater. This was Sarah, the town librarian. "Good morning," Anna said in a soft voice. Sarah looked up and smiled. "Hello. You are the woman from the mansion on the cliff, aren't you?" "Yes, I am Anna. I am George's niece," Anna replied. "I want to learn more about the history of my uncle's house. And I want to know about a woman named Sophia." Sarah's eyes became serious. She stood up and walked to a section of the library with very old books. "George was a regular visitor here," she said. "He was very interested in the local history. And Sophia, everyone in town remembers her. She was a very talented artist." Sarah climbed a small ladder and pulled down a large, black book. It was a book of old newspaper articles from 40 years ago. She put it on a table and opened it for Anna. "Here is where it starts," Sarah whispered. Anna looked at the yellowed pages. She saw a photograph of a beautiful woman standing near an easel. It was Sophia. The headline said, "Local artist finds inspiration in shipwreck history." Anna read the article. It said that Sophia was studying the silver ship that sank in 1750. She believed the ship was carrying famous paintings that were still inside the hull. Anna turned the pages. She saw another article from a year later. The headline was much sadder. "Search ends for missing artist." The article said that Sophia went for a walk on the cliffs and never came back. Her body was never found. Some people thought she fell into the sea. Others thought she left the town in the middle of the night. "Look at this," Sarah said. She pointed to a small name in the article. The police interviewed everyone. This man, Victor, was the last person to see her. He was a businessman who wanted to buy her work. "Victor?" Anna asked. "Is he still in town?" "No." Sarah shook her head. "He left many years ago. But his family still owns property here. Actually, Mr. Henderson bought his old house." Anna felt a cold feeling in her chest. Everything was connected to Mr. Henderson. She thanked Sarah and looked at a few more records. She found a map of the mansion from the year 1900. She noticed something strange. On the original map, there was a small tunnel that led from the basement of the house toward the sea. The tunnel, Anna thought. That must be how they moved the paintings to the cave. She closed the heavy book. She had a new lead. She needed to find the entrance to that tunnel in her basement. As she left the library, she saw a dark car parked across the street. The driver was wearing a hat and looking at the library door. Anna walked quickly to her car. The mystery was growing, and the danger was getting closer. Anna sat back down at the library table. Sarah, the librarian, brought over a large blue folder. On the front of the folder, it said, "The Sinking of the Elena, 1750. Anna opened it carefully. Inside, there were drawings of a large ship with white sails. The ship looked powerful and proud. "The Elena was a famous ship," Sarah said in a quiet voice. "It was traveling from Spain to England. It was carrying a lot of gold. But the most important things were the paintings. The King of Spain was sending them as a gift. They were the most beautiful pictures in the world. Anna looked at a drawing of the coastline. She saw the high cliffs and the sharp rocks. "What happened to it?" she asked. "It was a clear night," Sarah explained. "There was no storm. There was no wind. But suddenly, the ship hit a large rock near the mansion. The rock was hidden under the water. The ship broke into two large pieces. It sank very quickly. Many people died that night. The local people said the ship was cursed." Anna read a report from a sailor who survived. He said the water was very cold and dark. He saw the large wooden boxes falling into the sea. He tried to save one, but it was too heavy. The boxes sank to the bottom of the ocean. For many years, divers tried to find the treasure. They found a few gold coins, but they never found the paintings. "People thought the sea took the art," Sarah continued. "They thought the salt and the sand destroyed the paint. But your Uncle George did not believe that. He spent years reading about the currents of the ocean. He believed the boxes did not stay at the bottom of the sea. He believed the waves pushed them into a secret place." Anna thought about the letters from Sophia. Sophia said the boxes were sealed with thick wax. That was why the water did not ruin them. They were safe inside the cave. George and Sophia were the only people who knew where the ocean had hidden the treasure. "Is there a story about the rock?" Anna asked. "The rock that the ship hit?" Sarah nodded. "Old stories say the rock was not always there. Some people think a great piece of the cliff fell into the sea and created a new danger. That same falling rock created a hidden entrance to a cave. But the cave is only visible when the tide is very low." Anna felt a cold chill. The mansion was built right above that spot. Her house was sitting on top of a 100-year-old mystery. She realized why Mr. Henderson was so interested. He did not care about the history. He wanted the paintings because they were worth millions of dollars. She thanked Sarah again and walked out of the library. The wind was hitting the trees, and the sky was getting darker. She looked at the ocean. Somewhere down there, in the dark water and the cold stone, the Elena's treasure was waiting. She had the map and the key. Now, she just needed to find the tunnel in her basement. Anna drove back to the mansion. The sky was now the color of lead, and the wind was getting much stronger. The sea below the cliff was white with foam and made a constant, heavy noise against the rocks. The house looked lonely and cold. She parked her car and ran to the front door. She went inside and turned the heavy lock. She felt like the house was a safe box, but she was starting to change her mind. She went to the kitchen. She wanted to make some hot tea to stay warm. Her mind was full of thoughts about the shipwreck, the tunnel, and the Mr. H from the letters. She walked across the floor toward the sink. Suddenly, her foot caught on something. She tripped and almost fell. She hit the edge of the heavy wooden table with her hand. "That is strange," she whispered. She looked down at the floor. One of the wooden floorboards was not flat. It was sticking up a little bit. Anna was surprised because she had cleaned this floor yesterday, and it was perfect then. She moved the table a few inches to see better. She knelt on the cold floor and used her fingers to pull the edge of the board. It moved very easily, as if someone had recently opened it. Under the board, there was a small, dark space. It was not a hidden room or a place for treasure. Anna reached inside and felt something hard and smooth. She pulled it out. It was a very small black box, no bigger than a coin. It had a tiny, round glass eye in the center. Anna felt a cold wave of fear. It was a camera. She looked at the back of the device. There were small, thin wires and a tiny red light that was blinking slowly. It felt warm in her hand. This was not an old secret from Uncle George. This was a modern, electronic camera. It was working. She looked around the kitchen with wide eyes. She felt like she was being watched at that very moment. Someone had entered the house while she was at the library and hidden this device. They wanted to see where she went and what she found. They probably saw her move the wardrobe. They probably saw her find the silver key. She looked at the ceiling and the corners of the room. She found another one near the window, hidden behind a small piece of decorative wood. Her heart began to beat very fast. She was not alone, even when the house was empty. Someone was sitting somewhere with a screen, watching her every move. Was it Mr. Henderson? Was he the one who broke into her home? Anna felt a deep sense of panic, but then she felt angry. This was her house now. She took the camera from the floor and pulled the wires. The small red light went out. She did the same to the camera near the window. She realized she could not stay in the house without a plan. The person watching her would know the cameras were broken. They would know she found them. She grabbed her bag and her heavy coat. She needed to find the tunnel in the basement immediately. She had to find the treasure before the watcher came back to the house. Anna stood in the middle of the kitchen. She looked at the two small cameras in her hand. They were dark and cold. She felt a terrible feeling in her stomach. Someone was looking at her. Someone knew her secrets. They saw her find the silver key. They saw her read the letters from Sophia. "I'm not safe," she said quietly. She walked into the library. She moved slowly. She did not want to make any noise. She looked at the high bookshelves and the old paintings. On the wall, there was a large portrait of a man from many years ago. He had a serious face and dark eyes. Anna looked closely at the frame of the painting. In the corner of the wood, she saw a tiny, round hole. It was another camera. She felt a wave of anger. This was her home. Her uncle gave it to her. She took a small knife from the kitchen and pulled the camera out of the wood. She broke the thin wires. Now, the watcher could not see the library. She went to the hallway. She looked at the lamps and the rugs. She found another camera hidden inside a decorative vase on the table. She found one more near the front door. The person watching her was very professional. They knew exactly where to put the devices. Is it Mr. Henderson? She wondered. He was always so friendly. But he asked about the silver key. He talked about the history of the house. Or was it someone else? Maybe it was the man in the dark coat she saw in the garden. She looked out of the window. The sky was very dark now. The storm was getting closer. The trees moved violently in the wind. She saw a light in the distance. It was the lighthouse, moving its bright beam across the sea. Then, she saw another light. It was a small, white light near the edge of the garden. It moved for a second and then disappeared. Someone was outside. They were watching the house from the trees. Anna felt like a bird in a cage. Every window felt like a big eye. She pulled the heavy curtains closed in every room. She wanted to be in the dark. If she was in the dark, the cameras could not see her well. She took her flashlight and her bag. She went to the door of the basement. The basement door was at the end of the kitchen hallway. It was painted gray and had a heavy iron handle. Anna put her hand on the handle. It was very cold. She remembered the map from the library. It showed a tunnel from the basement to the sea. I must find it now, she thought. I cannot stay here. They are coming for the key. She opened the basement door. A smell of damp earth and old stone came up from the dark. She turned on her flashlight and began to walk down the wooden stairs. She did not look back. She only looked into the darkness below. Anna walked down the old wooden stairs into the basement. The air was very cold and thick. It smelled like wet stone and salt. Her flashlight cut through the heavy darkness. The basement was a large, open space with a floor made of hard earth and rock. There were many old things here. She saw heavy wooden boxes, coils of thick rope, and old fishing nets hanging from the ceiling. It looked like a place for a man who loved the sea. She remembered the map from the library. The map showed a tunnel that started here and went toward the cliffs. Anna moved her light along the stone walls. The walls were made of large, grey rocks. They were very strong. She looked for a door or a hidden opening. She pushed on some of the stones, but they did not move. Suddenly, she saw a very small window high up on the wall. It was near the ceiling of the basement. The window was dirty and covered in spiderwebs. Anna found an old wooden crate and pushed it under the window. She climbed onto the crate and looked out. The storm was very loud now. The wind was hitting the house with great force. Rain was falling in heavy sheets. The garden was a dark world of shadows. But then, Anna saw something bright. Near the edge of the cliff, a small white light was moving. It was a flashlight. The light moved back and forth across the grass. Then, the light pointed down toward the sea. Anna took the old map out of her pocket. She looked at the red X. The light was exactly at that spot. Someone is at the cave entrance. Anna whispered. She felt a cold fear in her heart. Was it Mr. Henderson? Or was it the man in the long coat? They were not waiting for the morning. They were looking for the treasure in the middle of a dangerous storm. The light moved again and then stopped. It stayed pointed at a specific group of rocks for a long time. Then, the light disappeared. Anna stayed on the wooden crate for many minutes. Her heart was beating very fast. She realized that the others were already at the cliff. They were closer to the secret than she was. She needed to find the tunnel in the basement immediately. If she could find the tunnel, she could reach the cave from inside the house. She climbed down from the crate and went back to the stone wall. She moved her hands over every inch of the rock. Near the back of the basement, she noticed something different. The floor was not made of earth there. It was made of flat stones. She looked at the wall above the flat stones. There was a large, heavy wooden cupboard against the wall. It was filled with old paint cans and tools. Anna tried to move the cupboard. It was very heavy, just like the wardrobe in her bedroom. She pushed with all her strength. Her boots slid on the wet floor. Slowly, the cupboard moved to the side. Behind it, the wall was not made of stone. It was made of thick wooden boards. In the center of the wood, there was a small, round hole. It was a lock. Anna took the silver key from her bag. Her hands were cold and shaking. She put the key into the lock and turned it. The wood made a heavy, clicking sound. A small door in the wall opened. Behind the door was a dark, narrow tunnel. It smelled like the ocean. Anna stepped inside. She knew she was walking into a trap, but she had to follow the light. Anna stepped into the tunnel. The air was much colder here than in the basement. The walls were not made of smooth stone. They were rough and wet. She held her flashlight in one hand and touched the wall with the other. The ground was slippery with mud and small rocks. Every time she moved, her boots made a heavy sound on the wet floor. She walked slowly for a long time. The tunnel went down, deeper and deeper toward the ocean. Finally, she saw a small, grey light at the end of the tunnel. She turned off her flashlight. She did not want anyone to see her. She moved quietly toward the light. The tunnel ended at a small wooden door hidden behind thick green bushes. Anna pushed the bushes aside and stepped out. She was now standing on a very narrow path on the side of the cliff. The storm was very loud. The rain hit her face like cold needles. Below her, the ocean was a wild, white mess. The waves hit the bottom of the cliff with a sound like a heavy door closing. Anna looked up at the mansion. It looked very small and far away on the top of the hill. She then looked down the path. She saw the white light again. It was about 50 meters away. The person was moving toward a large group of black rocks. Anna stayed close to the stone wall of the cliff. She moved one step at a time. The wind tried to push her off the path, but she held onto the rocks with her fingers. She felt a deep fear, but she also felt a strong desire to know the truth. The person with the flashlight stopped near a large opening in the rocks. This was the entrance to the sea cave. The person was tall and wore a long, dark coat with a hood. Because of the rain and the dark, Anna could not see their face. The person looked around for a moment. Anna froze and pressed her body against the cold stone. The flashlight moved across the path, just inches from her feet. The person did not see her. They turned and stepped into the cave. The white light disappeared into the darkness of the mountain. Anna waited for a minute. She was breathing very hard. She knew she should go back to the house and wait for the police, but she was afraid the treasure would be gone by morning. She decided to follow the trail. She walked to the spot where the person was standing. The ground was very muddy here. She saw large footprints in the dirt. These were the boots of a large man. As she looked at the footprints, she saw something bright on the ground. It was not a rock and it was not a piece of glass. It was something made of metal. She knelt down and picked it up. It was a heavy gold watch. She turned it over in her hand. The back of the watch was smooth, but there were 3 letters written on it. Anna used her small flashlight to see the letters. Her heart stopped for a second. The mystery was changing again. She was no longer just looking for paintings. She was looking for a person from the past. Anna held the gold watch in her hand. It felt very heavy and cold. The rain continued to fall, and the wind was very strong. She used her flashlight to look at the watch again. The glass on the front was broken into many small pieces. The gold was scratched. On the back, the letters were very clear. VM. VM. Anna said quietly, "Victor." She remembered the name from the library. The librarian said that Victor was a businessman who wanted to buy Sophia's art. He was the last person to see Sophia 40 years ago. But Mr. Henderson bought Victor's old house. Was this Victor's watch? Or did it belong to someone else with the same initials? She looked at the entrance of the sea cave. The white light was gone. The person in the dark coat was deep inside the mountain. Anna knew she could not go inside now. It was too dangerous. The tide was coming back in, and the water was rising quickly. If she went into the cave, the ocean might trap her there. Suddenly, she heard a sound. It was not the wind or the waves. It was the sound of a heavy stone falling. It came from the path behind her. Anna turned her head quickly. She saw a shadow moving near the bushes where the secret tunnel door was hidden. Someone was following her. Anna did not wait. She put the gold watch into her pocket. She did not go back to the tunnel. She was afraid the person was waiting there. Instead, she began to climb the narrow cliff path toward the main road. The path was very slippery. She had to use her hands to pull herself up the wet rocks. Her heart was beating like a drum in her chest. She reached the top of the cliff. She was wet and cold, and her clothes were covered in mud. She looked back at the mansion. The house was dark. There were no lights in the windows. She felt like the house was a trap. She did not want to go back inside. She wanted to see another person. She wanted to feel safe. She ran to her car, which was parked near the front of the house. She took the keys from her bag and opened the door. She sat inside and locked the doors immediately. She started the engine and turned on the heater. She was shaking from the cold and the fear. She looked at the gold watch again. It was a beautiful item, but it felt like a heavy secret. Who was the person in the cave? And who was following her on the path? She knew she could not solve this mystery alone. The cameras in her house and the man on the cliff were too much for one person. I need help. She thought. I need to go to the police. She drove the car away from the mansion. The road was difficult because of the rain. But she did not stop. She drove toward the lights of the town. She had the silver key, the old map, and now the gold watch. She was ready to tell her story to someone who could help her. Anna drove into the center of Silver Cove. The town was very quiet. Most of the shops were closed, and the streets were empty because of the storm. She saw the blue light of the police station at the end of the main street. It was a small, square building made of white bricks. Anna parked her car and ran to the door. She was wet, and her hair was messy, but she did not care. She pushed the door open. Inside, the room was bright and warm. It smelled like floor cleaner and old coffee. A man was sitting behind a tall wooden desk. He wore a dark blue uniform with a silver badge. He was reading a newspaper, but he looked up when Anna entered. This was Officer Miller. He was a middle-aged man with a tired but kind face. "Good evening," Officer Miller said. He looked at Anna's wet clothes and muddy boots. "Are you okay, miss? Did you have a car accident in the storm?" "No," Anna said, catching her breath. "I am Anna. I live in George's house on the cliff. I need to report something very strange." Officer Miller stood up and walked around the desk. "George's niece. I heard you moved in. Please, sit down." He gave her a glass of water. Anna sat on a plastic chair and told him everything. She talked about the footsteps in the night, the hidden cameras in her kitchen, and the man she saw in the garden. Officer Miller listened quietly. He did not interrupt her. When she finished, he shook his head slowly. "Cameras? That is very serious. Anna, this is a quiet town. We don't usually have problems like that. Are you sure they were new?" "Yes," Anna said. "And there is more." She reached into her pocket and put the gold watch on the desk. "I found this tonight on the cliff path. Someone was entering the sea cave. They dropped this." Officer Miller picked up the watch. He looked at the initials VM on the back. His face changed. He looked surprised and a little bit worried. He took a small magnifying glass from his drawer and looked at the watch again. "VM," he whispered. "These are the initials of Victor Moore. He was a very wealthy businessman here 40 years ago. But Victor Moore disappeared at the same time as Sophia, the artist. People said he went to Europe, but no one ever heard from him again. The librarian told me about him." Anna said. "Does Mr. Henderson know him?" Officer Miller looked at her. Mr. Henderson was Victor's assistant many years ago. When Victor disappeared, Mr. Henderson bought his house and his land. He became a very important man in town. "I think Mr. Henderson is looking for something," Anna said. "Something that my uncle and Sophia hid in the cave. I think he is the one watching me." Officer Miller sighed. "Mr. Henderson is a very respected man. Anna, I cannot arrest him because of an old watch and some small cameras. But I will keep this watch here. I will come to the house tomorrow morning to look at the cameras. For tonight, you should stay at the local hotel. It is not safe for you to be alone on that cliff during a storm." Anna felt a little bit better, but she was still worried. She knew Mr. Henderson was close to finding the treasure. "Thank you, officer," she said. She left the station and drove to the small hotel near the harbor. She felt the weight of the silver key in her bag. The police had the watch, but she still had the most important secret of all. Anna sat on the edge of the bed in the small hotel room. The room was simple. It had a bed, a wooden chair, and a small television. Outside the window, the rain was still heavy. She could hear the water hitting the glass with a steady, soft noise. She felt safe here, away from the dark windows of the mansion and the secret cameras. She opened her bag and took out the items she saved. She put the silver key, the old map, and the letters from Sophia on the white blanket. Then, she took out the small wooden chest she found under the basement floor. She looked inside the empty chest one more time. She moved her fingers along the bottom of the box. She felt a small bump in the wood. Anna used a small pen to lift the piece of wood at the bottom. It was a false bottom. Underneath, there was a single photograph. She took it out carefully. The photo was black and white, and the edges were a little bit yellow from time. In the photograph, she saw her Uncle George. He was much younger. He was standing in the garden of the mansion. He was wearing a suit and smiling. Next to him stood a woman. She was beautiful, with long, dark hair and a white dress. She was holding a large paintbrush. This was Sophia. They were looking at each other, and they looked very happy. Anna looked at the background of the photo. Behind them, there was a large stone statue. It was a statue of a woman holding a bowl of flowers. The statue was very tall and stood in the center of a circle of roses. The woman in the garden. Anna whispered. She remembered her uncle's note. He told her to look for the woman in the garden. She thought he meant a real person, but now she realized he meant the statue. She also remembered her walk in the garden. She saw many bushes and tall grass, but she did not see a stone statue. It must be hidden under the dead vines and the wild plants. She turned the photograph over. There was some writing on the back in George's messy handwriting. It said, "Our favorite place. Sophia's studio. June 1984. Under the writing, there was an address. 12, Harbour Lane. Anna felt a spark of excitement. Harbour Lane was a street in the village of Silver Cove. If Sophia had a studio there, maybe there were more clues about the paintings. Maybe Sophia left something behind before she disappeared 40 years ago. She looked at the photo of George and Sophia again. They looked like they had a big secret, but they also looked brave. Anna felt a connection to them. She wanted to finish what they started. She wanted to protect the art and find the truth about Victor Moore and Mr. Henderson. She put the photo back into the chest and hid it in her bag. She lay down on the bed and closed her eyes. For the first time since she arrived at Silver Cove, she felt like she was winning. Tomorrow, she would go to the police station to see Officer Miller. Then, she would find 12, Harbour Lane. She fell asleep listening to the rain, dreaming of a stone woman hidden in a garden of roses. The sun rose over Silver Cove with a pale, watery light. The storm had passed, leaving the streets covered in puddles and broken tree branches. Anna woke up early, her mind sharp and focused. She had a list of things to do. First, she went to the police station. Officer Miller was there, looking tired but alert. He held up a plastic bag containing the gold watch. "I've sent the serial number to the central records," he told her. "But I also found something in our old archives." This watch was reported stolen by Victor Moore's wife 2 weeks after he disappeared. He was supposed to be in London, but the watch was found here. It changes things. Anna. It makes it look like he never left Silver Cove. Anna felt a chill. And Mr. Henderson. "I'm keeping an eye on him," Miller said seriously. "But be careful. If he's involved in something from 40 years ago, he's had a long time to hide his tracks. Don't go back to the mansion alone today." Anna promised to stay safe, but she didn't tell him about the studio. She drove to the harbour area. Harbour Lane was a narrow, cobblestone street that smelled of salt and old wood. Number 12 was a small, 2-story building tucked between a fish market and a sailmaker's shop. The windows were boarded up with grey planks, and the blue paint on the door was cracked and peeling. She looked around. No one was watching. She tried the door handle, but it was locked. Then, she remembered the silver key. She pulled it from her bag. It had opened the silver box, the hidden door, and the chest. Perhaps it was the key to Sophia's life, too. She slid it into the lock. It turned with a smooth, familiar click. The studio was frozen in time. A thick layer of dust covered everything, turning the room grey. There were half-finished canvases leaning against the walls and jars of dried paint on a long wooden table. In the center of the room stood a large easel, covered by a white sheet. Anna walked to the easel and pulled the sheet away. A cloud of dust rose, making her cough. When it cleared, she gasped. It was a painting of the garden at the mansion. It showed the statue of the woman holding the bowl of flowers. But in the painting, the statue was different. Sophia had painted a small, silver handle hidden inside the stone bowl of flowers. Next to the easel was a small notebook. Anna opened it. The last entry was dated the day Sophia disappeared. The mechanism is complete. George helped me install the lever in the statue's bowl. It is the only way to open the tunnel's inner door from the outside. If the tide rises and the sea entrance is blocked, the garden is the only escape. The silver key unlocks the lever. I hope we never have to use it. Anna realized the truth. The statue in the garden wasn't just a piece of art. It was a key. It controlled a secret door that led into the sea cave from above. This was the woman in the garden her uncle wanted her to find. She looked at the painting again. The sun was hitting the statue's face in the picture, pointing toward a specific spot in the rose bushes. She heard a floorboard creak upstairs. Her heart stopped. She wasn't alone in the studio. Anna froze. Her hand stayed on the edge of the dusty notebook. The sound of the floorboard above her was unmistakable. It wasn't the wind, and it wasn't a settling building. It was the weight of a person. She slowly reached into her bag and gripped the heavy metal flashlight, the only weapon she had. "Is someone there?" she whispered, though she immediately regretted making a sound. Slow, deliberate footsteps began to descend the wooden stairs at the back of the room. A tall, thin man stepped into the grey light of the studio. He wasn't wearing a green coat like Mr. Henderson. Instead, he wore a dark, professional suit that looked out of place in the dusty room. His face was sharp and pale, with eyes that seemed to see right through the shadows. "The key, Anna," the man said. His voice was cold and perfectly calm. "You have the silver key. I know George gave it to you." "Who are you?" Anna asked, her voice trembling. "What do you want?" "My name is not important," the man replied, stepping closer. "But I represent the people who owned those paintings 40 years ago." Victor Moore was an amateur. He thought he could steal history and hide it in a hole in the ground. George and Sophia were thieves, too, in their own way, keeping what didn't belong to them. They were protectors. Anna snapped, her fear turning into a flash of anger. "They were keeping the art away from people like you." The man smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Beauty belongs to the highest bidder, my dear. Now, give me the key and the map. If you do, you can walk out of this dusty tomb and go back to your city life. If you don't, well, Silver Cove has a way of making people disappear." Anna backed away, her heels hitting the wooden leg of the easel. She looked at the painting of the statue, the secret lever. She realized this man didn't know about the garden entrance yet. He only knew about the cave and the tunnel. If she could get away, she had a chance to reach the treasure first. Suddenly, she grabbed a heavy jar of dried blue paint from the table and threw it at the man's feet. It shattered, sending a cloud of blue powder and glass into the air, while the man shielded his eyes. Anna bolted for the blue door. She burst out into the cold morning air of Harbor Lane and ran toward her car. She heard him shouting behind her, but she didn't look back. She jumped into her car, locked the doors, and started the engine. As she sped away, she saw the man standing in the doorway of the studio, watching her with a dark, focused expression. She didn't drive to the police station. She knew time was running out. If that man was in Sophia's studio, it meant he was searching everywhere. She had to get to the garden. She had to find the statue of the woman with the bowl of flowers. The storm had passed, and the secret of the silver ship was waiting to be brought into the light, or lost forever. Anna's tires screeched as she pulled into the driveway of the mansion. The house stood tall and silent, its grey stone walls damp from the night's rain. She didn't turn off the engine immediately. She sat for a moment, scanning the tree line for the man in the suit or the shadow in the long coat. The garden was still, the only movement being the swaying of the tall, wet grass in the breeze. She grabbed her bag, her heart pounding against her ribs. She knew the man from the studio wouldn't be far behind. She ran to the back of the house, where the garden was most wild. Armed with the memory of Sophia's painting, she pushed through the thick, tangled bushes near the edge of the cliff. "It has to be here," she whispered, her hands shaking as she pulled back a heavy curtain of dead vines and green ivy. For an hour, she struggled against the thorns. Her coat was torn, and her hands were scratched, but she didn't stop. Finally, her hand hit something hard and cold. She cleared away a thick layer of moss and dead leaves, revealing a base of weathered stone. She looked up. There she was, the woman in the garden. The statue was beautiful, even with the grey stains of time. It was a life-sized woman carved from white marble, looking out toward the sea with a peaceful expression. In her hands, she held a large stone bowl. Anna climbed onto the stone base to look inside the bowl. It was filled with rainwater and a few dead leaves. She reached her hand into the cold water, feeling around the bottom of the bowl. Her fingers brushed against a small, metal indentation. It was a tiny keyhole, hidden perfectly within a carved stone flower. Anna pulled the silver key from her pocket. It glinted in the pale afternoon light. With a deep breath, she slid the key into the stone bowl. It fit perfectly. She turned it, and a heavy, mechanical movement echoed from beneath her feet. Slowly, a large stone slab at the base of the statue began to slide back. It revealed a hidden set of spiral stairs made of dark, wet iron. A rush of salty, cold air surged up from the opening. This wasn't the narrow, cramped tunnel from the basement. This was a grander entrance, built with care and precision. Anna looked back toward the house one last time. She saw a black car approaching the gates in the distance. No more running, she said to herself. She stepped onto the iron stairs and began her descent. As she went down, the stone slab above her began to slide shut, triggered by a weighted mechanism. The world of the garden disappeared, replaced by the roar of the ocean echoing through the underground chamber. The stairs led her into a massive sea cave. Her flashlight beam danced across the walls, which were wet and sparkling with salt crystals. At the far end of the cave, sitting high above the reach of the tide on a natural stone shelf, were several large wooden boxes. They were sealed with thick, black wax, exactly as Sophia had described in her letters. This was the treasure of the Elena. This was the history George and Sophia had died to protect. But as Anna walked toward the boxes, a voice echoed from the shadows of the cave's sea entrance. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Anna spun around. Standing by the water's edge, drenched in sea spray but holding a very modern flashlight, was Mr. Henderson. But he wasn't alone. Behind him stood the man in the suit from the studio. The roar of the ocean filled the cave, echoing off the high stone ceiling. Mr. Henderson stepped closer, his green coat darkened by the sea spray. Beside him, the man in the suit, the one from the studio, held a small, black device that looked like a tracker. The light from their flashlights crossed Anna's, creating a chaotic web of brightness in the damp darkness. "I didn't want it to end like this, Anna," Mr. Henderson said. His voice was tired, stripped of the cheerful neighborly tone he had used before. "I truly hoped you would just sell the house and leave. George was my friend, but he was a stubborn man. He lived his whole life guarding a ghost." "A ghost?" Anna asked, her back against the cold, wax-sealed boxes. "You mean Sophia?" "I mean Victor Moore," Henderson replied, his eyes flickering toward the dark water. "Victor didn't just disappear. He was obsessed. He wanted these paintings not for their beauty, but to pay off debts that would have ruined him. That night 40 years ago, there was a struggle here in this very cave. Sophia tried to stop him. George tried to intervene." The man in the suit stepped forward, his face a mask of cold professionalism. "Enough history. Arthur. The tide is rising. We take the smaller crates first. They contain the Goya and the Velasquez." "You killed him, didn't you?" Anna directed her question at Henderson, her voice rising above the sound of the waves. "You were his assistant. You took his house, his land, and you've been waiting for the tide to give up the rest of his secrets." Henderson looked away, but the man in the suit laughed. "Arthur didn't have the stomach for it, but he's been a very helpful guide. Now, Anna, move away from the crates. The silver key has done its job. You are no longer required." Anna looked at the boxes behind her. She could feel the rough texture of the black wax. She realized that if they took these boxes, the truth about Sophia and George would be buried forever under the greed of men like the one standing before her. "The tide," Anna said, pointing toward the cave entrance. "Look." A massive wave surged through the opening, swirling around the feet of the two men. The water was rising much faster than they expected. The storm had pushed the sea higher than the normal high tide mark. "We have 5 minutes," Henderson shouted, panic finally breaking through his calm. "The lower path will be underwater." The man in the suit ignored the warning. He lunged toward Anna, reaching for the bag that held the map and the letters. Anna dodged him, slipping on the wet stone. As she fell, her hand brushed against a heavy iron ring bolted into the cave wall, the same type of mechanism Sophia had described in her notebook. She didn't think. She grabbed the ring and pulled with all her weight. A deep, grinding noise came from the ceiling of the cave. Above the stone ledge where the paintings sat, a secondary stone door, a floodgate designed by George, began to drop. It was meant to seal the treasure away from the water, but it was also going to seal the only way back up to the garden. "Anna, stop!" Henderson screamed. The cave was shaking. Dust fell from the ceiling. Anna had a choice. She could run for the spiral stairs and save herself, leaving the paintings to be taken, or she could finish what her uncle started and seal the cave forever. The heavy stone floodgate groaned as it slid down the guide rails in the cave wall. It moved with the slow, unstoppable force of history. Dust and small pebbles rained down from the ceiling, splashing into the rising seawater. "You've killed us all," Mr. Henderson shrieked, his voice cracking with terror. He scrambled toward the stone ledge, trying to find a grip on the smooth rock, but the water was already at his waist. The sea was no longer just swirling. It was surging, driven by the pressure of the storm outside. The man in the suit didn't scream. He lunged for the smallest wax-sealed crate, trying to heave it toward the spiral stairs. But the wood was heavy and the floor was slick with algae. He slipped, the crate crashing back into the rising pool. "The stairs. Anna. Open the gate," Henderson pleaded, reaching a hand toward her. Anna looked at the man who had spied on her, threatened her, and coveted her uncle's secrets. For a second, she felt a flicker of pity, but then she saw the man in the suit reach into his jacket. He wasn't reaching for a map. He was pulling out a small, dark object. "Get back!" Anna shouted. She turned and scrambled up the dark iron stairs. The iron steps were freezing and slippery. Behind her, the grinding noise reached a crescendo. The massive stone slab hit the floor of the cave, sealing the treasure, and the villains, behind a wall of ancient rock. The sound of the ocean was suddenly muffled, replaced by the ringing in Anna's ears. She climbed higher and higher, her lungs burning. The spiral stairs seemed endless, winding through the very heart of the cliff. Finally, she saw the pale light of the garden through the closing gap at the top. She threw herself onto the wet grass just as the stone slab at the base of the statue clicked into place. The woman in the garden stood silent once more, her marble eyes watching the grey horizon. Anna lay on the ground, gasping for air. The rain had turned into a light drizzle, and the wind had died down to a whisper. In the distance, she heard a sound that brought a surge of relief to her heart: the wailing of sirens. Blue and red lights flashed through the trees as two police cars sped up the long driveway. Officer Miller jumped out before the car had even fully stopped. He ran toward the garden, his flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. "Anna, are you all right?" he shouted, seeing her muddy, torn clothes. "I'm okay," she choked out, pointing toward the statue. "They're down there. Mr. Henderson and another man. The cave, it's flooded." Miller signaled to his officers. "Get the rescue gear. Call the Coast Guard for the sea entrance." He knelt beside Anna. "We found the car. The black one you saw. It's registered to a private historical recovery firm with a very bad reputation. You did the right thing. Anna, the paintings are safe," she whispered, looking at the silver key still gripped tightly in her hand. "Uncle George, he won." As the police began their work, Anna looked back at the house. It didn't look like a cold, frightening mansion anymore. It looked like a fortress. A place of secrets, yes, but also a place of loyalty. She had come to Silver Cove looking for a new start, and she had found a legacy. 3 months later, the morning sun over Silver Cove was no longer cold and pale. It was the warm, golden light of late spring. The mansion on the cliff, once a place of shadows and peeling paint, was transformed. Workers moved across the roof, and the sound of hammers and laughter replaced the lonely whistling of the wind. Anna stood on the balcony, watching the gardeners restore the rose beds to their former glory. The Silver Cove mystery had dominated the headlines for weeks. The rescue of Mr. Henderson and the man in the suit, who was revealed to be a disgraced art historian named Julian Vane, had led to a massive investigation. Both men were now awaiting trial for theft, breaking and entering, and their roles in a decades-long conspiracy. More importantly, the world had learned the truth about the Elena. With the help of professional archaeologists and the Silver Key, the floodgate had been safely reopened. Inside the wax-sealed crates, experts found a lost collection of Spanish masterpieces, perfectly preserved. The discovery was called the greatest art find of the century. The paintings were now being prepared for a special exhibition at the National Gallery, dedicated to the memory of George Miller and Sophia Vance. Anna walked down to the library. The room was clean now, the smell of dust replaced by the scent of fresh beeswax and lemon. She sat at her uncle's desk and opened the small silver box one last time. Inside, she had kept the gold watch, the silver key, and a new photograph. While cleaning the secret room in the walls, Anna had found a final letter, tucked behind a stone. It wasn't about treasure or keys. It was a simple note from George to Sophia, written years after she had gone into hiding to escape Victor Moore's greed. "To my dearest Sophia, the world may never know what we did here, but every time the tide rolls in, I know the beauty is safe. You taught me that some things are too precious to be owned. They can only be protected." Sophia hadn't disappeared into the sea. She had lived a quiet, secret life in a neighboring town, protected by George until her peaceful passing years ago. They had lived apart to keep the secret safe, a sacrifice of love for the sake of history. Anna looked out the window. She had decided to stay. She wasn't just an office manager anymore. She was the curator of the Millervance estate. She planned to turn part of the mansion into a museum and a studio for young artists. The garden. The statue of the woman with the bowl of flowers was now surrounded by blooming red roses. The cave. The secret entrance was now a protected historical site. The community. Martha and the locals from the Anchor Cafe often visited, bringing stories and warmth back to the old house. As she stepped out into the garden, Anna felt the weight of the silver key in her pocket. It was no longer a burden or a source of fear. It was a reminder that history is alive, and that even the smallest person can protect a great legacy. She stopped in front of the marble statue. The sun hit the stone bowl, making the water inside sparkle like diamonds. Anna smiled, looking out at the endless blue of the ocean. The secrets were out, the treasure was safe, and for the first time in 40 years, the house on the cliff was finally at peace. The morning of the grand opening was bathed in a clarity that Silver Cove rarely saw. The mist had retreated far into the Atlantic, leaving the cliffs sharp and imposing against a sapphire sky. Anna stood on the porch, her hand resting on the smooth brass railing. The mansion no longer groaned with the weight of neglected secrets. It breathed with the life of the dozens of guests milling about the lawn. Journalists from London, local fishermen in their Sunday best, and art historians from across the continent had gathered to witness the unveiling of the Millivance Museum. Officer Miller stood by the gate, looking more relaxed than Anna had ever seen him. He caught her eye and gave a sharp, respectful nod. He had been instrumental in the transition, ensuring the security of the priceless works now housed within. Beside him, Martha from the Anchor Cafe was busy arranging a spread of pastries that smelled of cinnamon and success. The atmosphere was one of triumph, but beneath Anna's skin, a familiar prickle of intuition remained. She knew that while one story had ended, the mansion was far from finished with her. As the clock struck noon, Anna stepped forward to the silk ribbon stretched across the front door. My uncle, George Miller, and the artist Sophia Vance, believed that some things were too precious to be owned. She addressed the crowd, her voice steady. Today, we fulfill their wish. This house is no longer a fortress of secrets, but a sanctuary for history. With a swift snip of the silver scissors, the ribbon fell. The crowd erupted into applause, and the first group of visitors filed into the foyer. Anna spent the next few hours playing the role of the gracious host. She explained the wax sealing process of the crates and pointed out the delicate brushwork of the recovered Spanish masters. However, as the sun began its slow descent toward the horizon, a man she didn't recognize approached her near the portrait of the Elena. He was elderly, with a face like a map of the sea, weathered, wrinkled, and etched with deep lines. He didn't look like a scholar or a journalist. He wore a salt-stained peacoat and held a small, wooden box in his hands. You've done a fine thing, lass, the man said, his voice a low rasp. But George knew the Elena didn't sail alone. Every queen has a guard, and every guard carries a shield. Before Anna could ask what he meant, the man pressed the wooden box into her hands. The silver key was for the heart. He whispered, "This one is for the soul." He turned and vanished into the crowd of tourists before Anna could utter a single question. She retreated to the library, her heart racing. When she opened the box, she didn't find a key. Instead, there was an antique nautical compass. But as she moved it, she realized the needle wasn't pointing north. It was pointing directly at the floor beneath her feet. The gala continued outside, the sounds of a string quartet drifting through the open windows of the library. But for Anna, the world had shrunk to the size of the small wooden box. She sat at George's desk, the antique compass resting in her palm. The needle was made of a dark, iridescent metal she didn't recognize, and it shivered with a strange energy. No matter which way she turned the box, the needle remained fixed, pointing toward the corner of the library where the heavy oak shelves met the floorboards. What did he mean? George? She whispered to the empty room. What did I miss? The silent guest. As she began to think of the old sailor, had mentioned that the Elena didn't sail alone. Anna stood up and walked to the archive section of the library. She pulled down the manifests they had recovered from the sea cave. She had read them a dozen times, but now she looked for a different detail. She looked for mention of a second ship. After an hour of frantic searching, she found it. In a ledger hidden within the binding of a larger book, there was a mention of the Santa Maria de Regla. It was a smaller, faster vessel that had been part of the Elena's convoy. The ledger noted that while the Elena carried the art, the Santa Maria carried the instruments of the faith. A cold shiver moved down Anna's spine. The instruments of the faith wasn't a religious term. It was a code name for the navigational secrets and the diplomatic ciphers of the Spanish crown. If the Elena was the heart of the convoy, the Santa Maria was indeed its soul. And according to the ledger, the two ships had been lashed together during the final moments of the storm to prevent the smaller vessel from being swept away. If the Elena had hit the rocks below the mansion, the Santa Maria must have been dragged down with it. But where? The divers had found the cave, but they hadn't reported a second wreck. Anna looked back at the compass. The needle was still pointing stubbornly at the floor. She knelt in the corner of the room, pushing aside a heavy rug. She tapped the floorboards. They sounded solid, but she knew this house was a masterpiece of hidden spaces. She fetched a small magnifying glass and began to examine the seams of the wood. There, hidden in the intricate carving of the baseboard, was a tiny hole, no larger than a needle's head. She realized the soul wasn't a key. It was the compass itself. She noticed a small, retractable pin on the bottom of the compass box. She carefully aligned the pin with the hole in the baseboard and pushed. A soft, pneumatic hiss filled the room. The entire section of the bookshelf didn't swing open this time. Instead, the floorboards themselves began to retract, revealing a vertical shaft lined with a rusted iron ladder that descended into the very bowels of the cliffside, far deeper than the basement she had already explored. Anna stared into the dark abyss of the shaft. The air rising from it didn't smell like the damp earth of the secret room or the salt of the sea cave. It smelled of ozone and cold, dry stone. It was an artificial atmosphere, preserved by some ancient engineering. She knew she shouldn't go down alone, not after what happened with Vane and Henderson. But the mystery was a physical pull, a tide she couldn't fight. She grabbed her high-powered flashlight and a satellite phone, making sure to leave a note on George's desk for Officer Miller. Follow the compass. The descent was long and grueling. The iron rungs were cold, biting into her palms. She counted the steps. 100, 200, 300. She was far below sea level now. Finally, her boots hit a solid stone floor. She clicked on her flashlight, and the beam revealed a room that looked like a laboratory from a different century. The walls were lined with copper plates, and the ceiling was a dome made of thick, reinforced glass. Above the glass, the dark waters of the Atlantic swirled, lit occasionally by the bioluminescent glow of deep-sea creatures. Anna realized she was in an underwater observation chamber, built directly into a natural pocket of air within the cliff. In the center of the room was a large, circular table made of green marble. Resting on the table was a series of brass gears and astronomical maps. This was the shield the old sailor had mentioned. It wasn't gold or paintings. It was information. The Santa Maria hadn't just been a guard ship. It was a mobile archive of Spanish intelligence. As Anna approached the table, she saw a slot that perfectly matched the base of the compass she was holding. She placed the compass into the slot and turned it 30 degrees to the east, following the coordinates she had seen in Sophia's notebook weeks ago. The gears began to grind. A series of projectors, powered by a hidden light source, flickered to life. They cast images onto the copper walls, maps of the Atlantic, but with strange markings that didn't correspond to any modern geography. There were lines of trade, hidden currents, and most importantly, the location of 5 other guard ships that had supposedly sunk during the same century. It wasn't just one ship. Anna whispered, her voice echoing in the chamber. It was an entire treasury fleet, scattered along the coast. Suddenly, the satellite phone in her pocket buzzed. She pulled it out, surprised to have a signal this deep. It was a text message from an unknown number. It contained a single photograph, a picture of the silent guest sitting in the back of a black sedan, his hands tied. The message followed a second later. The soul is a heavy burden. Anna, bring the compass to the Widow's Peak at midnight, or the old man returns to the sea. The drive to Widow's Peak was a blur of adrenaline and fear. The peak was the highest point on the Silver Cove cliffs, a jagged tooth of rock that leaned precariously over the churning surf. It was a place of local legend, said to be where the wives of lost sailors waited for ships that never returned. At night, with the wind howling through the crags, it felt like the edge of the world. Anna pulled her car to a stop near the edge. The headlights cut through the gloom, revealing the black sedan parked 50 yards away. She stepped out, clutching the wooden box with the compass. Her hands were shaking, but her mind was remarkably clear. She had spent months learning the language of secrets. She wasn't the same woman who had arrived at the mansion with a simple silver key. A figure stepped out of the sedan. It wasn't Julian Vane or Mr. Henderson. It was a woman, dressed in a sharp, slate-grey coat. She moved with an athletic grace that suggested military training. Behind her, the silent guest sat in the passenger seat, his head slumped. The compass. Anna. The woman said. Her accent was European, refined and cold. My name is Elena. I believe you've been looking for my namesake's history. You're a descendant of the ship's captain. Anna realized, her voice catching the wind. But you're not interested in the art or the history. You want the maps. Elena smiled, a thin, sharp expression. The art is for museums. The maps are for the future. The Santa Maria carried the locations of the Spanish crown's deep-sea caches, strategic minerals, gold reserves, and diplomatic leverage that still carries weight in the modern world. George Miller was a fool to keep them hidden. He wasn't a fool. Anna countered. He knew that in the wrong hands, that kind of power causes wars. Power is only dangerous to those who don't know how to use it. Elena said, reaching out her hand. The old man is a retired diver named Elias. He was George's last link to the sea. Give me the compass, and he lives. If not, the current at Widow's Peak is very unforgiving. Anna looked at the compass in the box. She had noticed something in the underwater chamber that Elena hadn't. The copper walls hadn't just shown maps. They had shown a sequence. The compass wasn't just a map. It was a key to a much larger mechanism. If she gave it to Elena, she would be handing over a weapon she didn't fully understand. I have the coordinates memorized. Anna lied, stepping closer to the cliff's edge. If you kill him, I'll drop this into the surf. You'll never find the caches. The currents here will pull that box into the deep trench within minutes. Elena paused, her eyes narrowing. For the first time, the cold mask slipped. She looked at the churning water below, then back at Anna. You're a better gambler than your uncle. Anna. But every gambler eventually loses their hand. The standoff at Widow's Peak lasted only seconds, but to Anna, it felt like an eternity. Elena's hand moved toward her pocket, but before she could draw a weapon, a bright searchlight swept over the cliff from the sea below. It was a Coast Guard vessel, its siren wailing through the night. Officer Miller had followed the note. In the confusion, Anna dived toward the black sedan. She pulled the door open and grabbed Elias, the old sailor. Elena hissed a curse and sprinted for her car, but the terrain was against her. She realized she was outnumbered. She slammed the sedan into reverse, tires throwing gravel into the air, and sped away into the darkness before the police could reach the summit. Are you all right, Elias? Anna asked, helping the man out of the car. Elias coughed. his breath coming in ragged gasps. She has the second compass. Anna. There were two. One for the soul, and one for the mind. She found the one in Sophia's old studio. She only needed yours to synchronize the locations. Anna felt a sinking sensation. She had protected her compass. But she had only half the puzzle. If Elena had the other half, she was already halfway to the first cache. Officer Miller arrived a moment later, his face grim. She got away. But we have the plates on the car. Anna, you have to stop this. This isn't just about your uncle's house anymore. This is international. I can't stop. Miller. Anna said, looking out at the sea. They're going after the other ships. The Elena was just the beginning. They returned to the mansion, which felt colder now, despite the heaters. Elias sat in the library, sipping hot tea. He looked at the copper-lined shaft Anna had discovered. There's more to this room than maps, lass. He said. The copper plates. They aren't just for show. They're a transmission array. George used them to listen. Listen to what? Anna asked. The sea. Elias replied. The Santa Maria had a sister ship that didn't sink. It was captured. The Spanish used a form of acoustic telegraphy. Sound waves sent through the water. That chamber down there, it's a giant ear. Anna went back down to the chamber. Elias following slowly. She looked at the copper walls again. She noticed a series of small levers hidden behind the projector lenses. Following Elias's instructions, she began to tune the array. The room began to vibrate. A low, rhythmic hum filled the space, growing louder and more distinct. It wasn't the sound of the ocean. It was a rhythmic tapping. It's a distress signal. Anna whispered. No. Elias said, his face turning pale. It's a heartbeat. The Santa Maria isn't just a wreck. Anna. It's a tomb. And according to those sounds, something inside is still moving. The copper-lined room vibrated with the rhythmic pulse of the underwater telegraphy. Anna stood paralyzed, her hands hovering over the green marble table. Elias, the old sailor, looked transformed. His tired eyes were wide with a mix of reverence and terror. He began to turn the copper dials on the wall, adjusting the reception of the ancient acoustic array. It's not a human heart. Anna. Elias whispered, his voice cracking. It's the Sentinel. The Spanish designers were masters of clockwork and hydraulics. They built a mechanical log, a clock that could run for centuries, powered by the movement of the tides. As long as the moon pulls the ocean, that machine keeps ticking. It was designed to keep the ship's internal vaults dry by pumping out the seepage. Anna stepped closer to the wall, listening to the resonance. If the pump is still working, it means the Santa Maria isn't just a pile of wood at the bottom of the sea. It means there's an air pocket, a room that hasn't seen the light of day in 300 years. Elias nodded grimly. And that's what Elena wants. The mind compass she stole from Sophia's studio is the only thing that can calibrate the internal locks of that ship. Without it, anyone who tries to open the vault will trigger a mechanism that floods the entire cavern. She has the key to open the door, but she doesn't have the map to find the door itself. You have the soul, the compass that points to the location. Anna looked at the iridescent needle in her hand. It was vibrating in sync with the mechanical heartbeat. So we are in a stalemate. She knows how to open it, but she doesn't know where it is. I know where it is, but I can't open it. She won't wait for a stalemate. Elias warned. She'll be monitoring these frequencies too. She has technology George couldn't have dreamed of. She'll triangulate the source of this pulse within hours. Anna realized they were sitting in a beacon. The very room that gave them answers was also broadcasting their location to anyone with the right equipment. She grabbed her bag. We have to leave. If the Santa Maria is under these cliffs, we need to reach it before she brings a dive team. But I don't just want to protect the soul. I want the mind back. There's one person who might have known where Sophia hid the backup codes, Elias said, looking at the ceiling. The local priest, Father Dominic. Sophia was a woman of deep faith, but she was also a woman of deep secrets. She spent her final days at the St. Jude's Chapel, painting the altar. The St. Jude's Chapel sat on a lonely hill overlooking the village, its stone walls weathered by centuries of salt and spray. By the time Anna and Elias arrived, the moon was high, casting long, skeletal shadows across the small graveyard. Anna felt the weight of the soul compass in her pocket, its needle pulling her toward the chapel with an almost magnetic force. Father Dominic was a man who seemed as old as the chapel itself. He welcomed them into the small vestry, the air thick with the smell of incense and beeswax. When Anna showed him the photograph of Sophia and George, the priest's eyes softened with recognition. Sophia was a tormented soul, Dominic said, pouring them tea with steady hands. She spoke of a great responsibility she carried. She feared that the greed of men would turn a gift of history into a weapon of war. Before she disappeared, she painted a mural behind the altar. She told me that only someone with a soul would ever see the mind. Anna led the way into the main chapel. Her flashlight illuminated the mural. It was a stunning depiction of the sea, but instead of fish or ships, the water was filled with gears, cogs, and celestial maps. In the center of the painting was a figure of a woman, Sophia herself, holding a golden compass to her forehead. The mind, Anna whispered. She took the soul compass out of its box. As the moonlight hit the iridescent needle, a reflection bounced off the glass and hit a specific point on the mural, the woman's eye. Anna stepped closer and touched the painted eye. The plaster felt different, colder. She pressed firmly, and a small panel clicked open. Inside was a leather-bound journal, much smaller than the one Elena had stolen from the studio. It was a cipher book, filled with Sophia's handwriting. "This is it," Anna said, flipping through the pages. "These are the override codes for the Sentinel." Sophia knew someone might try to steal the mind compass, so she wrote down the mechanical logic of the locks. "With this, I don't need the other compass. I can stop the flooding mechanism manually." Suddenly, the heavy oak doors of the chapel burst open. The cold night air rushed in, extinguishing the candles. Elena stood in the doorway, her slate-gray coat flapping in the wind. She wasn't alone. 2 men in tactical gear stood behind her, their shadows stretching long across the pews. "You have a habit of finding exactly what I need, Anna," Elena said, her voice echoing in the sacred space. "First the location, and now the codes. You really are George's niece." The atmosphere in the chapel turned icy. Officer Miller had stayed at the mansion to coordinate the police, leaving Anna and Elias alone with the priest against Elena's team. Elena didn't look angry. She looked triumphant. She held up the mind compass she had stolen. It was glowing with a faint, blue light, reacting to the proximity of the soul and the cipher book. "The mind is lonely, Anna," Elena said, stepping into the aisle. "It's been searching for its partner for 40 years. Give me the book and the silver box, and I'll leave the priest and the old man in peace. I have no interest in more blood than is necessary." Anna looked at Father Dominic, who stood with a calm, stoic grace. She looked at Elias, whose hand was resting on a heavy brass candlestick. She knew they couldn't win a physical fight, but she also knew that the cipher book in her hand was the only thing standing between Elena and a global catastrophe of lost secrets. "You think you can just walk in and take history?" Anna challenged, backing toward the altar. "My uncle died protecting this. Sophia disappeared to hide it. You're just a scavenger. I am a restorer," Elena corrected. "I am restoring the balance of power. Now, the book." Before Elena's men could move, a low rumble shook the ground. It was the sound of the sentinel below the cliffs, its mechanical pulse accelerating. The tide was coming in with a ferocity that suggested a secondary storm, a king tide that only occurred once a decade. "The ship is active," Elias shouted. "The pressure is building. If the vault isn't stabilized now, the entire cliffside will collapse." Elena's eyes widened. She realized that her window of opportunity was closing. She signaled her men. "Take them, but keep the girl alive. We need her to read those codes." In the chaos that followed, Anna didn't run for the door. She ran for the small door behind the altar, a service tunnel that led down toward the sea. She knew the geography of the cliffs better than Elena's team. She knew that there was a secondary entrance to the underwater chamber through the chapel's well. "Elias, lead them the long way," Anna cried as she disappeared into the dark. She plunged into the narrow, vertical shaft of the old well, sliding down a rope she had noticed earlier. The air grew wet and salty. She could hear the roar of the ocean beneath her. She was heading into the heart of the storm, toward a ship that had been waiting 3 centuries to be found. The bottom of the well opened into a natural sea cave, separate from the one where the Elena's paintings had been found. Here, the water was deep and dark, swirling with white foam. Anna's flashlight revealed a submerged archway, the entrance to the Santa Maria's final resting place. She checked her gear. She wasn't a professional diver, but she had spent the last few weeks training with a local rescue team. She pulled on her mask and checked the oxygen tank she had hidden there earlier in the day. She knew Elena would be coming through the mansion's tunnel, but this path was faster, if more dangerous. Anna took a deep breath and submerged. The water was bone-chillingly cold. She followed the iridescent glow of the soul compass, which was now vibrating so intensely it felt like a living thing in her hand. The needle pointed straight through the archway. As she swam deeper, the natural stone gave way to man-made structures. She saw the hull of a ship, but it was unlike any shipwreck she had seen in books. It was encased in a giant, barnacle-covered iron cage, a protective cradle designed to keep the ship upright even as the cliff shifted. The Santa Maria de Regla was beautiful, its dark wood preserved by the lack of oxygen in the silt. Anna found the entrance, a pressurized airlock built into the side of the hull, a marvel of 18th century engineering that used heavy lead weights to seal the door. She reached the airlock and used the silver key. It didn't work. She realized she needed to use the mechanical logic from Sophia's cipher book. She looked at the door's sequence. Tide, moon, star. She turned the 3 external valves in the correct order. With a groan of rusted metal, the airlock opened. She stepped inside and waited as the water was pumped out by the Sentinel's ancient hydraulics. When the inner door finally opened, she stepped out into the dry, air-filled hold of the ship. The air was stale but breathable. It smelled of cedar and old ink. Her flashlight beam swept across the room and landed on a central pedestal. There, sitting in a velvet-lined case, was the mind compass's original housing. But it was empty. Looking for this. Anna turned. Elena was standing at the far end of the hold, dripping wet but holding a spear gun. She had come through the mansion's tunnel after all. She had the mind compass in her hand, and she was already slotting it into the control panel. "The vault is opening. Anna, you're just in time to see the world change." The interior of the Santa Maria was like a cathedral of wood and brass. The mind compass, now slotted into the central pedestal, began to spin rapidly. A series of blue lights flickered along the walls, not electricity, but bioluminescent fluid pumped through glass tubes, another secret of the Spanish instruments of faith. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" Elena said, her voice dropping to a whisper. They were centuries ahead of their time. They didn't just hide gold, they hid the blueprints for a different kind of world. Anna looked at the vault door at the back of the hold. It was a massive slab of dark steel, engraved with the royal seal of Spain. As the mind compass reached its top speed, the vault began to hum. "Wait!" Anna shouted, looking at her cipher book. Elena, stop. Look at the sequence. The mind isn't the final key. It's a trap for anyone who doesn't have the soul to balance it. If you open that door without the soul compass in the secondary slot, the sentinel will reverse the pumps. It won't just flood the cave, it will implode the air pocket. Elena paused, her hand hovering over the final lever. She looked at Anna, then at the iridescent compass in Anna's hand. You're lying. You're trying to save your uncle's protector legacy. Read the book. Anna threw the cipher book across the deck. It slid over the polished wood and landed at Elena's feet. Sophia wrote it in the margins. The mind is logic, but the soul is the limit. Logic without limits is destruction. That was the faith they were talking about, the faith that the person who found this would have the wisdom to use both. Elena picked up the book and scanned the pages. Her face went pale as she realized Anna was telling the truth. The pressure gauges on the wall were already climbing into the red. The sentinel's heartbeat was no longer a steady thump. It was a frantic, metallic clanging. The ship is preparing to self-destruct, Anna said, stepping forward. Give me the mind. We have to synchronize them. Outside the hull, the king tide hit the cliffs. The entire ship groaned and shifted in its iron cradle. A crack appeared in the ceiling of the hold, and a thin stream of seawater began to spray inside. We don't have time. Elena screamed. She threw the mind compass to Anna. Anna caught it and ran to the pedestal. She placed the soul compass into the secondary slot. The two needles began to spin in opposite directions, creating a perfect circle of violet light. Anna pulled the lever. The vault door didn't slide open. Instead, it dissolved. The metal slab was actually a series of thousands of tiny interlocking plates that retracted into the walls. Behind the door was a room filled with silver cylinders, hundreds of them, each one containing the maps, codes, and diplomatic secrets of a lost empire. But as the vault opened, a shadow moved in the corner of the room. A figure was sitting in a chair, facing the maps. It was a man, perfectly preserved by the lack of oxygen, his hand still resting on a final, unread letter. Victor. Anna whispered. Anna stood motionless as her flashlight beam rested on the seated figure. Victor Moore did not look like the monster the town's legends had created. He looked like a man who had simply run out of time. His clothes, though dated, were impeccably preserved by the lack of oxygen in the sealed vault. On the table before him lay a single sheet of parchment, held down by a heavy silver inkwell. Elena's spear gun lowered slightly, her professional coldness momentarily shattered by the sight. He made it in. She whispered. My grandfather always said Victor was the only one with the courage to follow the logic of the sentinel. Anna stepped forward, her heart heavy. She reached for the letter, her fingers trembling. As she moved the parchment, the air from the newly opened vault caused the paper to feel brittle, but the ink remained dark and legible. It was written in an elegant, hurried script. To whoever follows. I am not a thief. I came here to prove that history belongs to no one man. George and Sophia tried to stop me, not because they were greedy, but because they knew the burden of the mind. I found the truth, but the tide is a cruel master. The air is thinning. If you find this, know that the cylinders contain the location of the Guardian's Gate, the final resting place of the Spanish crown's greatest secret. Do not let the council find them. The council. Anna repeated. She looked at Elena. Is that who you work for? The council. Elena's face hardened. They are the ones who funded the search. They are the ones who want the world to stay in a specific order. Victor was one of them, but he went rogue. He wanted to give the secrets to the public. A sudden groan echoed through the ship's hull. The king tide was no longer just a pressure. It was a physical force. The iron cradle that held the Santa Maria began to twist. The mechanical heartbeat of the sentinel reached a frantic, dying pace. The water spraying through the ceiling turned into a steady pour. We have to go. Anna said, grabbing the silver cylinders from the shelves and stuffing them into her waterproof bag. The airlock won't hold much longer. Elena looked at Victor's body, then at the silver box. For a second, the two women were not enemies, but survivors. The cylinders first. Elena agreed. But if we die down here, the council wins anyway. The sound of the sea was no longer a distant roar. It was a deafening scream. As Anna and Elena scrambled toward the airlock, the floor of the Santa Maria tilted sharply. The iron cradle had finally snapped under the weight of the surging tide. The ancient ship, preserved for 3 centuries, was beginning to crumble into the abyss of the sea cave. The pressure is equalizing. Elena shouted over the noise. The airlock won't open manually anymore. We need to blow the seal. Anna looked at the control panel. Sophia's book mentioned an emergency release, but it's outside the door. They were trapped. The water was already at their knees, freezing and dark. Anna's flashlight flickered as it hit the swirling surface. In the corner of her eye, she saw the soul and mind compasses still glowing on the pedestal. They were the only things still vibrating in sync with the Sentinel. The compasses. Anna cried. They aren't just keys. They are the detonators for the weights. She lunged through the water, her fingers numbing. She grabbed both compasses and brought them to the airlock door. There were 2 circular indentations in the metal, hidden behind the royal seal. She slammed the compasses into the slots and turned them simultaneously. A sequence of heavy vibrations through the hull. The lead weights that held the airlock shut were released. The door didn't just open. It was forced inward by the immense pressure of the ocean. A wall of black water hit them with the force of a train. Anna felt herself being tossed through the dark, her lungs burning as she fought to keep her mouth closed. She felt a hand grab her arm. Elena. And together they were swept out of the ship and into the chaotic darkness of the flooded cavern. The Santa Maria groaned one last time before it slid from its ledge, disappearing into the silt of the deep trench. Anna didn't look back. She kicked toward the faint, flickering light above, the well in the chapel. She was out of air, her vision blurring at the edges, but the silver cylinders in her bag felt like an anchor to life. The climb back up the well was a nightmare of shadows and freezing rain. When Anna's head finally broke the surface of the water at the bottom of the shaft, she coughed violently, her chest heaving. Above her, she could hear voices, shouting and the heavy movement of boots. Anna! Elena! It was Elias's voice, echoing down the well. A rope ladder hit the water beside them. Anna grabbed it, her strength nearly gone. She looked at Elena, who was clinging to the stone wall, her face pale and bloody from a cut on her forehead. Despite everything, Anna reached out a hand. Elena looked at it for a long second, then took it. They climbed slowly, hand over hand, until they reached the floor of the vestry. Officer Miller was there, his gun drawn, along with 2 other officers. They were standing over Elena's 2 tactical guards, who were now handcuffed and sitting on the floor. You're lucky to be alive, Miller said, rushing to help Anna up. The entire cliffside just settled. We forgot the chapel was going to go with it. Elena collapsed onto a wooden bench, shivering. She didn't try to run. She didn't even look at her men. She just stared at the floor. It's over, she whispered. The Sentinel is gone. Not everything is gone, Anna said, pulling the waterproof bag from her shoulder. She set it on the table. The silver cylinders touched together, a sound of history surviving against the odds. Miller looked at the cylinders, then at Elena. We found her car and her equipment. She's going in, Anna. But for now, we need to get you to a doctor. Wait, Anna said, looking at Elias. The old sailor was standing by the mural of Sophia. He looked at the cylinders and then at Anna. You found him, didn't you? Elias asked quietly. "We found Victor," Anna replied. "He died protecting the mind. He wanted the public to know." Elias nodded, a tear tracing a path through the salt on his cheek. "Then George's work is done. The soul and the mind are back together." The following week was a blur of high-level security and international headlines. The Silver Cove mansion was now a fortress, guarded not by secrets, but by the British government and specialized historians. Anna sat in the library, which had been turned into a temporary laboratory. The silver cylinders were laid out on the green marble table, each one carefully cleaned. Using a specialized laser scanner, the historians had begun to extract the maps from the cylinders. They weren't just maps of the coastline, they were global charts. The first cylinder contained the locations of the Sentinel ships, 5 other vessels similar to the Santa Maria, hidden across the globe. The second cylinder detailed their acoustic telegraphy network, a method of communicating across oceans using the very heartbeat Anna had heard. The third cylinder revealed the Guardian's Gate. The Guardian's Gate isn't a place on land. One of the historians explained to Anna. It's a specific coordinate in the mid-Atlantic. According to these charts, the Spanish discovered a natural geothermal vent that they used to power a permanent underwater archive. Anna looked at the maps. The lines were intricate, filled with codes that even modern computers were struggling to crack. "So Victor was right," she said. "There's an entire world of history we've never seen." She thought about Elena, who was now in a high-security facility. The council she spoke of was being investigated, a shadow organization of billionaires and power brokers who had been suppressing these discoveries for a century to maintain their control over deep-sea resources. "What happens now?" Anna asked. "Now," a voice said from the doorway. It was a woman in a dark suit, a representative from the United Nations. "Now we form a global task force, and we want you to be a part of it. Ms. Miller, you have the soul and the mind. You're the only one who has seen the Sentinel in action." Anna's life in Silver Cove was no longer quiet. The mansion had become the unofficial headquarters for the Sentinel project. But even as the world celebrated the discovery, a new danger began to emerge. Elena's warning about the council hadn't been an empty threat. One night, while working late in the library, Anna received a strange transmission on the acoustic array Elias had helped her tune. It wasn't the steady heartbeat of the Sentinel. It was a message in the same code Victor had used in his letter. "The gate is being breached. The others are coming. Do not trust the suit." Anna looked at the UN representative, who was standing by the window, talking into a secure phone. "Do not trust the suit," she whispered to herself. She realized that the council wasn't just an outside group. They were already inside. The Global Task Force wasn't just about history. It was a race to the Guardian's Gate. She reached for the silver key, which she now wore on a chain around her neck. She looked at the compasses, which were now locked in a glass case. She knew what she had to do. She couldn't let the council take the gate. She slipped out of the library and headed for the garden. The woman in the garden was still there, watching the sea. Anna knew there was one more secret George had left her, a way to reach the gate without the UN's help. She reached into the stone bowl of the statue and turned the hidden lever. But this time, the stairs didn't lead to the cave. They led to a small, pressurized pod, a modern addition George had built in secret during his final years, a lifeboat for the soul. "I'm coming, Uncle George," Anna said, stepping into the pod. "I'm finishing the journey." The secret pod was a marvel of George Miller's hidden genius. It sat nestled in a concrete cradle beneath the statue's base, looking like a cross between a 19th-century diving bell and a modern spacecraft. Its hull was a dark, matte titanium, reinforced with the same copper plating Anna had seen in the acoustic chamber. As the stone slab overhead sealed her in, The silence of the garden was replaced by the low, electrical hum of a reactor coming to life. He didn't just find history, Anna whispered, touching the leather-bound pilot's chair. He built a bridge to it. Suddenly, the intercom crackled. It wasn't Elias or Officer Miller. It was Ms. Sterling, the UN representative. Her voice was no longer professional. It was sharp and predatory. "Step out of the vessel. Anna. You don't know what you're doing. That technology belongs to the Council. We have spent billions ensuring that the gate remains a myth. If you launch, you are a criminal of the highest order. The only crime is keeping the truth in the dark." Anna replied, her hand hovering over the ignition lever. "You're not here to study history. You're here to bury it." Through the pod's reinforced porthole, Anna saw Sterling's security team entering the garden. They were carrying heavy cutting tools, headed straight for the statue. Anna knew she had seconds. She consulted Sophia's cipher book one last time. The sequence was the same. Tide, moon, star. She entered the codes into the pod's navigation computer. The floor beneath the pod began to tilt. A flood of seawater rushed into the launching chamber, but the pod remained buoyant. With a sudden, jarring jolt, the magnetic locks released. Anna felt a surge of force as the pod was shot through a narrow underwater tunnel, far beneath the reach of the king tide. Behind her, the mansion and the cliffs of Silver Cove disappeared into the darkness of the sea. The pod sensors flickered to life, displaying a direct course toward the mid-Atlantic. The soul and mind compasses, now integrated into the pod's dashboard, glowed with a steady, violet light. They weren't just vibrating now. They were singing, a low-frequency hum that seemed to guide the vessel through the deep sea currents. Anna was alone in the abyss, but for the first time, she felt exactly where she was meant to be. For 3 days, the pod moved through the silent world of the deep Atlantic. Anna watched through the porthole as bioluminescent creatures drifted past, like ghosts in a midnight sky. She ate from the emergency rations George had packed, tins of high-protein biscuits and filtered water. She spent her hours studying the silver cylinders, which were now glowing in sympathy with the pod's reactor. On the 4th morning, the navigation screen began to flash. The depth gauge read 4,000 meters. The temperature outside the hull was rising, not from the sun, but from the Earth itself. The Guardian's Gate. Anna whispered. Ahead, the sea floor opened into a massive volcanic rift. Plumes of hot, mineral-rich water rose like black smoke from geothermal vents. But in the center of this fire was a structure that defied logic. A massive dome of reinforced glass and gold-flecked steel sat over the rift, held in place by giant obsidian pillars. It was the Spanish Crown's final secret, a permanent underwater station, powered by the heat of the planet. As the pod approached, the station's exterior lights flickered to life. A series of massive copper rings began to rotate around the dome, creating an electromagnetic field that pushed the crushing weight of the ocean away. It was a masterpiece of acoustic engineering, the same technology Sophia and George had died to protect. The pod entered a docking bay at the base of the dome. As the water was pumped out, Anna felt the vessel settle into a metal cradle. The hatch hissed open, and she stepped out into a hallway lined with white marble and silver trim. The air was warm and smelled of ozone and ancient parchment. "Welcome, Anna." A voice echoed through the hallway. It wasn't a recording. It was a synthetic projection of George's voice, programmed into the station's core. "If you are hearing this, it means the Council has failed. It means the soul and the mind have returned to the heart. Follow the light to the archive. The world is waiting." Anna walked through the central corridor of the gate. The station was vast, a library of the deep. In every room, she saw evidence of a world that could have been. There were mechanical computers powered by steam and hydraulics, astronomical charts that predicted the movement of stars 10,000 years into the future, and maps of continents that no longer existed. The instruments of faith. Anna realized, standing in the center of the great archive. It wasn't a religious faith. It was a faith in the future. The cylinders she had brought from the Santa Maria were only the beginning. The archive contained the collective knowledge of the Spanish Guardians, a group of scholars and explorers who had realized, even in the 1700s, that humanity's greed would eventually lead to the destruction of the surface world. They had built the gate as a seed bank for civilization, a place where history, science, and art could survive the rise and fall of empires. In the center of the archive was a final pedestal. It held a silver plate with an indentation the size of her hand. Anna stepped forward and placed her hand on the plate. Suddenly, the walls of the archive transformed. The glass dome above became a giant screen, showing a live feed of the world above. She saw the cities of the 21st century, the melting ice caps, the crowded streets, and the flicker of satellite communications. But she also saw the shadows, the Council's influence, the hidden trade routes, and the suppressed technologies. The gate is a mirror. George's voice whispered. It shows what we are, and what we can be. But the gate is also a transmitter. It can broadcast the truth to every screen, every radio, and every mind on the planet. One press of a button. Anna. That is the choice the Guardians left for the last of their line. Anna looked at the central lever. If she pulled it, the Council's power would vanish overnight. The secrets of free energy, deep-sea medicine, and true history would be available to everyone. But she also knew it would cause chaos. The world wasn't ready for the truth, but it was dying from the lies. A shadow fell across the archive floor. Anna turned to see a sleek, black submarine docking at the secondary bay. Ms. Sterling stepped out, followed by a dozen armed men. But, to Anna's surprise, Elena was with them, her hands no longer in cuffs. Elena looked at Anna with a complicated expression, part regret, part warning. It ends here, Anna, Sterling said, her voice echoing in the marble hall. Step away from the console. The gate is too much for one girl to manage. It belongs in the hands of those who can govern its impact. You mean those who can profit from it? Anna countered, her hand resting on the lever. Elena stepped forward, her voice low. Anna, listen to me. The Council will destroy this place if they can't have it. They have a thermal charge set to detonate the rift. If you don't step away, the gate, the archive, and everything George worked for will be turned to ash. If I step away, the truth stays buried forever. Anna said. She looked at Elena. You saw the Santa Maria. You saw Victor. He died so this place would be found. Are you really going to let them win? Elena looked at Sterling, then at the soldiers. She saw the greed in their eyes, the same greed that had killed her grandfather. In a sudden, fluid motion, Elena drew a concealed flare gun and fired it at the station's fire suppression system. The archive was suddenly filled with a thick, white fog. In the confusion, Anna didn't run. She turned to the console. She didn't just pull the lever. She entered the final code from Sophia's cipher book, the code for release. The copper rings outside the dome began to spin at a terrifying speed. A pillar of violet light shot up from the rift, piercing through the dark Atlantic waters toward the surface. It wasn't a weapon. It was a signal. It was every byte of data, every map, and every secret in the archive being broadcast across the globe. It's done. Anna shouted. It's already in the clouds. You can't stop the truth now. Sterling screamed in rage, but the station was already beginning to shudder. The thermal charge had been triggered by the surge of energy. Abandon ship. Sterling commanded her men. As the Council fled back to their submarine, Elena grabbed Anna's arm. The pod. Elena cried. We have to go, now. The surface of the Atlantic was calm as the first rays of the sun broke over the horizon. 5 miles from the Silver Cove cliffs, a small titanium pod bobbed in the gentle swells. Anna and Elena sat on the roof of the vessel, breathing in the fresh, salty air. They were exhausted, battered, and salt-stained, but they were alive. In the distance, the sirens of the Coast Guard were approaching, but they weren't the only ones. The sky was filled with news helicopters and private planes. The world had woken up to a new reality. On every phone and television on Earth, the Guardian's map was unfolding, a treasure map of history that no one could ever own again. Officer Miller's boat reached them first. He helped them aboard, his face pale with shock. "Anna, what have you done?" "The news. It's everywhere. They're calling it the digital renaissance." "I just finished the delivery," Anna said, leaning against the railing. She looked at the silver key in her hand. It was no longer glowing. Its work was done. The new Silver Cove. Months later, the mansion on the cliff had truly changed. It was no longer a place of secrets, but a global center for the Sentinel Project. The mansion, now a university of deep-sea history, where scholars from every nation worked together. The garden. The statue of the woman with the bowl remained, but the roses were now the most vibrant in the country. The legacy. Sophia's art was displayed in the Great Hall, a testament to the woman who had seen the future in a sea cave. Elias sat on the porch, teaching a new generation of divers about the currents. Mr. Henderson's trial had concluded, and the council had been dismantled by a world that no longer needed their hidden resources. Anna stood at the edge of the cliff, looking out at the sea. She wasn't an office manager or a curator anymore. She was a guardian. She knew that there were more ships to find, more secrets to protect, and a whole world beneath the waves waiting to be explored. She took the silver key and, for the first time, she didn't put it in her pocket. She threw it into the deep, blue water. It didn't belong in a house or a pocket. It belonged to the sea, where the heart and the soul would always be at peace. The wind caught her hair as she turned back toward the house. The story of the Elena was over, but the story of the future was just beginning.